Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in Season 2 Part 24 of What If the Transformers Were in My Hero Academia. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 47, Have I Got a Deal for You? Part 1, Before the team knew it, the final week before internships had nearly passed by. It was now the Friday before they would all depart on their respective escapades across Japan, and the students from 1A and 1B were all feeling the excitement. Granted, there were still some concerns, mainly from Kyoka's mysterious visitor known only as Jinx. And because of that, the group were on alert a lot more than usual, keeping an eye out for anything that could have been a ninja in disguise observing them from afar. Though of course, none of them could really tell if anything was a ninja or not from just a glance. That day of school had come to an end, and the gang were reflecting on their situation as they walked to the parking lot. Once again, Tenya wasn't with them, having gone directly home to see his brother arrive home from the hospital. Neither were Setsuna, Abara or Tetsu, the 1B students focused on prepping for their internships. Itsuka, though, was out on a ride with Flare Up, so they would be at base shortly. Damn, these ninjas must be really good at hiding, Mina remarked whilst rubbing her chin. You think they know we're trying to look out for him? Denki asked, scratching his head. Well, of course, Mina reasoned. If they're watching us, they'd have to be. Kyoka couldn't help but roll her eyes at the whole exchange. Way to share a brain cell, you two. Keep up the great detective work. Hey, the duo exclaimed. The earphone jack user flung her hands up in the air. Hey, forgive me for being snarky, but it's kinda how I cope with potentially being stalked by ninjas. Her eyes darted back and forth before swiftly ducking behind Izuku, much to the boy's surprise. Green Bean, keep a sharp eye out for anything that's conspicuously red. With a soft sigh, Izuku lifted his arm up and glanced back to his paranoid best friend. Kyoka, I doubt that you've got ninjas on your tail 24/7. If these people are heroes, then they've gotta have other stuff to do during the day, right? We're talking ninjas here, Izuku. Kyoka reminded. They don't do their main operations in the daytime, meaning they're free to. Without warning, she spun around and whipped an arm toward a bush, pulling the branches back. Hide in plain sight, huh? But all that was behind the shrub was a gray squirrel, its head perking up in alarm before it dashed up into a nearby tree. Kyoka could practically feel her entire friend group staring at her in pity. Alright, maybe not. Maybe it'd be best to not worry about this situation while we're out in the open, huh? Ochako advised with a small, reassuring smile to Kyoka. Let's go meet up with the bots and see what's going on at base, huh? Kyoka's shoulders slumped in defeat. Huh, yeah, you're right. Say, did anyone see May come out yet? I think she actually left a bit early with Power Loader's permission. Momo recalled, having seen the pink-haired inventor earlier. She said something about putting the finishing touches on a baby she was working on. Eijiro gave a slight wince at that. Hoo boy, hopefully it doesn't explode. Izuku quickly pointed at the redhead. Hey, to be fair, not many of her inventions have exploded recently. So she's got a good track record going there. Out the corner of his eye, Izuku could see RC and Bulkhead roll up into the parking lot not too far away. But that said, we should probably get going back to base. Optimus no doubt has a few things he wants to tell us before we head out on our internships. And so, after meeting up with their Cybertronian friends, the students were rolled out toward the school's training grounds, where they were immediately bridged to Autobot HQ. All while blissfully unaware that someone was tailing them, and once again left frustrated by the sudden disappearance. Damn it. Again, every time. The large figure in the shadows growled before activating his comlink. Jinx, this is Tiger Claw. It happened again. Seriously. Jinx exclaimed. What is with that girl in portals? No clue, but it's evident that she's at least told her friends about what happened. Tiger Claw growled, as a pair of feline ears folded back against his large, furry head, his tail swishing behind him irritably while his massive, paw-like hands gripped his radio. I told you that preemptively dropping in on her was a bad idea. Well, I didn't think she'd actually tell anybody. HMPH, she is so going to get an earful when she arrives. At Autobot HQ, Erizur was in her Falcon mode, busying herself as she completed her week-long project. Building a nest. Yes, it was a bit stereotypical, but Optimus had told her to roost, and roost she did. Of course, it wasn't a typical bird's nest. Because not only was it made of branches, but it was held securely by bits and pieces of scrap metal, too. And, as she inspected the bowl-shaped structure one final time, Eraser came to a satisfying conclusion. Ah, perfect. She hopped up into it and shimmied herself comfortably into it, ruffling her feathers with a contented sigh. All while Sunstreaker and Sideswipe watched from below. "Ya know, I sometimes forget how uniquely Maximals operate," the elder Lambo brother remarked. "Yeah, dude, it's like, they've got the mind of a bot but the spark of a beast." Sideswipe nodded. As if on cue, Strongarm came over with a canister of oil in one hand, the other placed firmly on her hip as she stared at the red bot with a deadpan expression. "Stellar observation, Sideswipe." She sipped her oil as Sideswipe whipped around and frowned at her. "Next you'll say a Titan is like a normal bot, but bigger. You are very lucky that I'm feeling kinda sympathetic for you right now." Sideswipe countered. Sunstreaker groaned and shook his head. "Alright, let's not get into a brawl, we've had enough of those lately." All the same, the yellow mech tightened his lips, his optics full of concern for his teammate. "But on that note, have you talked with Tenya today at all?" Strongarm lowered her sights down to her oil barrel, swishing the liquid around with a downcast expression. "Yes, overcome." Her focus went back to Sunstreaker with a sigh. "I don't know, Sonny, I've tried to help him as much as I possibly could, but, no matter how much I try, I still see that darkness behind his eyes. He can't get what happened to Tensai out of his mind, which is understandable, but I have a feeling that he's letting his personal feelings against the hero killer take control of him. And you're worried about what he might do as a result, right?" The cadet nodded. "Yes, he may be by the book, but he's still a child. One who's prone to overwhelming emotions." With a growl of frustration, Strongarm knocked back the remainder of her oil, crushed the barrel, and then threw it over her shoulder into the awaiting dumpster. "Grah, Primus, I just wish I could do something too. Hey guys." All of a sudden, Mina's voice came shouting from the base, causing everybody to jump in surprise. "We're here. Gah, URRRP. Strongarm slapped her hand over her mouth in shock and embarrassment at her surprise belch, and she felt everyone's gazes upon her immediately. "Scrap, I shouldn't have downed that whole thing at once." Her optics darted between everyone, the kids, the twins, Bulkhead, RC, Bumblebee and even Eraser, as they stared at her. After composing herself she pointed a finger to all of them and warned, "No one, and I mean no one speaks about this. Ever. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Mina saluted, along with everybody else. With one obvious exception. PFFTT, bahahaha. Sideswipe held his sides as he fell to the ground, laughing and kicking at the air in absolutely hilarity. "Ha ha ha. Are you kidding? That was hilarious. I should have recorded that for posterity's sake. Hey. Think about the headline, Krabby Cadet lets out behemoth burp. Ha ha." Just then, Sideswipe felt a very tight grip around his foot, and was met with a very dark expression from Strongarm. "Ha, it was a joke. Ook." The crowd watched with slack jaws as Strongarm flung Sideswipe so far, that he splashed down in the nearby ocean. And not in the shallow part. "Will he be okay?" Momo asked. "He'll be fine, eventually," RC said as she eyed her blue and white comrade. "Provided you actually let him be okay." Strongarm raised her head up, folding her arms over her chest. "Don't worry, that was just a warning." RC took a deep intake, trying to get things back on track. "Anyways, how's it going everybody?" You know, the usual." Sunstreaker shrugged. "Though I'm kinda stunned that we haven't seen much con activity in a while." Izuku furrowed his brow, bringing a finger to his chin. "Yeah, it is a bit odd that they've been quiet lately. Maybe they're waiting for Skywarp to get better before they try something new." Up on top of the base, Eraser gave a confident chortle as she hopped out of her nest, leapt off the roof and then transformed in mid-drop, landing in her robot mode in a crouch in front of the group. "Hey, well, if they have any smarts, they'll know to avoid me the next time we encounter one another." Placing her fists to her hips, she nodded down to the group. "So, kids, have another fine day at, Skull." The teens all laughed a little before Ajiro corrected her. It's school, Eraser. But you were pretty close this time. Ah, sorry. Human concepts and traditions are a bit difficult to get a handle on. Nevertheless, the bird bot was quick to thrust her hand up to her completed nest. But, on that note, I have finally finished building my personal quarters. You like? Ooh, I like a lot, actually. Ochako beamed. I'm digging the mix of natural and metal construction on your nest, Eraser. Ah, thank you. Eraser puffed out her chest. I do take pride in my work. So, what is on the agenda for today? Denki placed his hands behind his head with a shrug. Not much outside of doing some final preps before our internships. Maybe a bit of training, some video games, stuff like. However, the blonde was abruptly interrupted when an alarm unexpectedly went off inside the base, taking them all by surprise. And I spoke too soon. Guess we do got some excitement going on. Come on. Bulkhead ushered everyone to follow him. Could be cons. Let's hurry. As the others all rushed inside, though, Sideswipe was bringing up the rear, utterly soaked and crawling along the ground while covered in seaweed. Oh, no please, don't wait up for me, I'll be there eventually. He grumbled before spitting water out of his mouth. Thanks a bunch, guys. Tap tap, MHA. Sideswipe craned his head up, seeing Ajiro grinning back down at him. Hey man, relax, I'm still waitin' for ya. He jerked a thumb to himself, flashing his pointed teeth. Come on, let's go catch up with him. The younger Lambo brother suddenly welled up with emotion, sniffling with happiness as he placed a hand on his human partner's back. SNF, Ajiro, you're a real pal. After a few minutes, nearly everyone had gathered in the main control room, where all of them were met with the back of red alert as he stood in front of the computer console. The only ones they had to wait for were, ironically, Flare-Up and Optimus Prime. The Autobot scout had to arrive via ground bridge with Itsuka in tow. Thankfully, the redhead wasn't scheduled to work that day, so she was more than willing to come along. After coming through, Flare-Up leapt up and transformed, catching Itsuka in her arms as both gave a holler. Woo! Cheers, loves! That cavalry has arrived, Itsuka added with an excited smile. And we're ready for the mission. Meanwhile, Optimus had been out on patrol, but was close to returning anyway. So thankfully, it wasn't long before the Prime pulled into base, unhitched his trailer, and transformed. Roller dutifully exited the trailer as well, transforming and hopping on top of it before vaulting further up onto Prime's shoulder. Apologies for the delay, everyone. Optimus said as she strode in. Hope we didn't keep ya waiting too awful long. Roller added in. No, you both are sufficiently on time. Red alert assure as he finally turned around, facing the rest of the team. I'm glad to see that we have every available bot we can muster, if I'm being honest. Still, there were a few notably absent names. Well, aside from the other mini-cons, of course. Flare-Up gave a shrug. Let 'em have their fun with the gang. After pulling off that last mission, they deserve it. The medic hummed in agreement. Yes, I suppose you're right. But, onto the matter at hand, Red Alert pressed a button on the console and, on screen, a map of the planet Earth came up. And, right in the center of North America's eastern side, a red dot with rings pulsating around it popped up. I've deciphered the location of yet another artifact from Cybertron. A chorus of oohs and ahs echoed throughout the team as Denki pumped a fist up high. Haha, alright, way to go, Red. Momo looked at the map, placing a hand upon her chin as she recognized the location. It would appear that it's somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains of North America. Quite the smart place for a hiding spot, I'd say. And why's that, Yao Momo? Mina tilted her head. Well, not only is the terrain rugged, as many mountains are, but it is also very heavily forested. Momo explained. So not only are we dealing with a tough area to navigate, but also one with very reduced visibility thanks to all the foliage. Finding this artifact won't be too easy this time, I'm afraid. A very astute observation, Momo. Optimus concurred, nodding toward the map. In which case, I believe it would be prudent to separate ourselves into different groups once again for this venture. Everyone, pair up with your teams of 4 from the previous mission. This time, we will be going deep into the mountains, so be prepared for anything. However, Flare-Up raised her hand. That's good and all, Optimus, but, she pointed between herself and Eraser. Ya also got a couple extra heads, this time. Eraser saluted the Autobot leader respectfully. I would greatly appreciate it if you let us join this mission, Optimus Prime, sir. Are you certain, Eraser? Optimus asked. Remember, this would be your first mission out in the field. Of course, sir. I have to earn my stripes with the Autobots, and I would do anything to do so. The Prime grinned beneath his faceplate at her enthusiasm. Very well, then I believe a slight change in teams will be in order. Now that there are 12 of us, it'd be best to keep the number of squads as small as possible. Meanin' that now, the bots will be goin' in trios. Jazz announced, clapping his hands together. The kids were taken aback by the sudden change, but were still excited to see how the teams would be handled now. It took a few minutes, but after the mass shuffling, the teams ended up as follows: Windblade, Jazz and Eraser. Optimus, Strongarm and Springer. Flare Up, RC and Bumblebee. And finally, Bulkhead, Sideswipe and Sunstreaker. Wow, this setup really is different, Ochako whispered, only to feel a tapping on her shoulder. There, she was met with a beaming Itsuka, raising a hand to her. Hey, you ready to head out together, neighbor? Why you're coming along, Itsuka. Red Alert gave a grin and an affirming nod. She and the other 1B students showed that they're more than capable of fending off a Decepticon, so we figured it was only fair. Ochako brightened up and shared a laugh with Itsuka, the duo doing a double high five. Haha, awesome. I won't be the only human on my squad, then. Yeah, let's find that relic. The redhead shouted. Kyoka and Momo both stared up at Eraser eagerly, the former giving her a thumbs up. Hope you're ready for this, newbie. The earphone jack user smirked. Don't worry, we'll show ya the ropes. I look forward to it. Eraser chuckled. Momo rolled up her sleeves and started producing cans of a certain spray from her body, handing at least 2 to each of her friends. We'll also be in a place where wild animals are around every corner, so here's some bear spray in case any approach you. Izuku grinned as he and the others took their cans. Wow, thanks, Yaoyorozu. This'll help a lot. However, as he spoke, Izuku couldn't help but notice that everyone's sights were glued to him, bots included. He glanced left and right between them all and uttered, everyone alright. Their response was all of them pointing behind him, which made the greenette slowly shift his gaze past his shoulder, and he was met with a pair of gleaming, yellow crosshairs for eyes. Muscles. Eep. Izuku was too late. He couldn't stop Mei as she grabbed him by the shoulder and forcefully spun him around, stopping him with both hands when he faced her. I've finished it. The mad inventor cheered. The boy shook in her grasp, afraid of what it could possibly be. Really? What's it? It is the final addition I wanted to add to your hero costume. Mei pulled out Izuku's briefcase from behind her back and shoved it into his arms, nearly knocking the wind out of him. Here, go put it on and I'll show you. But how'd you even get? Less talky, more change why? Shoved into a nearby closet by force, the group had to wait as Izuku changed into his hero costume, all while the others were left very confused as Mei shimmied in place excitedly. Eijiro craned his head up to Red Alert with a raised brow. Red, you're usually helping Hatsume build stuff. So, any idea what this is about? The medic wore a knowing smile and held up a single finger. Oh, trust me, Eijiro, once you see it, you'll understand why she's excited. It wasn't a satisfactory answer, but the group didn't have long to wait since Izuku came out right at that moment in his beta hero costume. For the most part, it seemed normal, though there were 2 notable absences, one being the bunny hood that Mei had already removed entirely from the alpha design. Though of course, that had been gone from the moment he got that version of his costume. More prominently, though, his mask was missing. The metal respirator that tied off around his neck was nowhere in sight. Hatsume. Izuku asked with concern. Where's my mask? Hehehe, right here. Mei once again reached behind her and pulled the mask seemingly out of nowhere, though there was something very different about it. Here ya go. Thanks, but where are the ties? Izuku held it in front of his face. I can't wear it without them. Mei quickly waved that off. Ya don't need those anymore. She winked and pointed at the mask. Red and I added some new features to it that'll not only make for a better wearing experience, but make it even more practical, too. Slip it on and it should do the rest. Izuku was hesitant to say the least. He wasn't much of a fan of surprise upgrades, especially if it messed with his mother's original design. But on the other hand, the beta suit was a lot more practical, so if May and Red Alert did something to make even his mask more practical, it could prove useful. He glanced up to Red Alert and he gave a nod of approval. It's all right, Izuku. We've made sure that it won't explode. Not quite the reassurance I was hoping for, but thanks. Izuku took a deep breath and then placed the metal respirator over his mouth and nose, and then Kerchink. CHKTCHKTWHRRTSZKTSZK. Izuku let out a gasp as the back of the respirator suddenly shifted around and clamped behind his head, securing itself in place. And then, much to his and everyone else's shock, a set of metal panels began to shift up and out from all sides of the mask, forming a round dome around Izuku's head. The Autobots and students watched as Izuku staggered back, his hands going up around the forming panels as they compressed into a protective, emerald green helmet that fit Izuku's head and matched the rest of his costume perfectly. The only part that was still exposed were his eyes, and it didn't take long for that to be rectified as a red, one-way visor popped up in front of them. The visor itself was very round at the edges, and they seemed to be modeled after insectoid compound eyes. And, to finish things off, a set of green chevrons extended out from the center of the visor, extending up to resemble Izuku's old, bunny-eared, hood. There was also a small, red jewel between the two chevrons, as well as a strip of silver paint that extended from the center of the forehead to the back of his helmet, just to add some color division. By the time the helmet finished forming, the one-for-all user was left utterly confused. Can someone just tell me what the heck just happened? He asked with a soft echo thanks to the helmet. Dude, Denki muttered, he and Ajiro sharing a grin. You just got a very badass upgrade. I'm sorry, but I can't exactly see myself right now. Izuku patted around the new helm, noting the large chevrons in his visor. Anyone have a mirror? Momo took out her compact and offered it to him with a smile. Here, Midoriya, you'll definitely like what you see. Izuku was about to state how he'd be the judge of that, but by the time he saw himself, it was far too late. He already agreed with her. The helmet was sleek, streamlined and most importantly, amazingly cool. Of course, the fact that it was built into his respirator was already amazing, but it also blended in with the mask so seamlessly, which only accentuated the helmet's design more overall. May leaned in with a hopeful grin. Well, do y'all like it, muscles? I don't know what to say. Izuku admitted, turning to his mad inventor friend. Hatsume, you somehow took my mask and made it spectacular. By this point, he was choking up, and he went to rub the tears flowing from his eyes, but the visor was still in the way. Thank you. No problem. Oh, and by the way, if you wanna raise the visor up, there's a button toward the back of your mask that does that. She watched Izuku press the button and the red visor popped up, revealing his teary eyes to everyone. There ya go. Also, on the other side, there's a button that lets ya toggle different eye colors if ya don't like red. Really? Izuku popped the visor back down and then went for the other button, holding Momo's compact up to see his eyes change from red, to blue, to gold, to white and finally to bright green before cycling back again. Wow. Hatsume, you thought of everything. Ochako pressed her hands together gleefully. She really outdid herself this time, that's for sure. However, Itsuka couldn't help but tilt her head. Still, I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like I've seen a helmet design similar to this one before. Hey, isn't it obvious? Kyoka smirked, earning her some inquisitive glances before she leaned over and whispered something into Momo's ear. Initially, the creation user was also perplexed by the request, but once the punk rocker explained her plan, Momo was all for it. Oh, haha, of course, why didn't I realize it sooner? Momo extended her arm and, from out of her hand, she created a long, red scarf. Not a thick, winter scarf, but one that was made out of a very thin material, with pointed tips on each end. She handed it to Kyoka, who beckoned Izuku over to her. Come here, Green Bean, we gotta complete the look. Initially hesitant, Izuku slowly made his way over to Kyoka before she signaled for him to turn around. Once he did, she reached around his neck, going up on her tiptoes to tie the scarf securely. And, there. Well, seem familiar now. Judging by the looks of realization on the team's faces, the tied-off scarf was all they needed. Oh my gosh, Midori's a common rider. Mina exclaimed. A what now? Bulkhead asked. A common rider. Itsuka slapped her forehead. Gah, I feel dumb now. She craned her head up to the bots as she explained. Kamen Rider is a long-running superhero TV series here in Japan that was around far before quirks became a thing. The usual plots involve masked heroes that resemble grasshoppers fighting against the forces of evil, usually after being transformed into said hero thanks to whatever the evil force had planned. Optimus hummed in intrigue, placing a hand to his chin. I see. So they are heroes that are created by evil who then fight against that evil. Interesting. He set his optics onto his protege, giving him a thumbs up. Well, in my opinion, you would make a fine rider, Izuku. Ooh, yeah, Kamen Rider Deku, has a neat ring to it. Ochako agreed. Izuku was very thankful that no one could see him blushing underneath his helmet, though that didn't stop his hand flying to his neck bashfully. You guys, no need for that. Though I do have to ask, the one for all user focused on May once again. Did you intentionally design this to resemble a rider helmet? May rocked back and forth on her feet, shifting her eyes up and away with a knowing smile. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Heck knows I wasn't inspired when I saw a girl from 1B have an Ultraman-inspired get-up. Oh, you mean Kodai? Itsuka said with a cheeky grin. Hey, yeah, she's a big Toku fan. Springer suddenly coughed into his hand, bringing everyone's attention to him. While this whole talk about TV heroes is fascinating and all, and that helmet is pretty sick, I think we shouldn't let it distract us from the mission, right? Alright, sorry for getting off topic. Izuku apologized, though there was still one more question on his mind. By the way, Hatsume, how do I not wear the helmet? Lifting her chin, May pressed her thumb underneath it. Oh, there's a third button under the respirator's front faceplate. Right in front of your chin. Izuku reached for the spot in question and found the button in no time, pressing it and allowing the helmet to decompress from his head and then fold back in on itself until it was in the respirator again. The only part that was still out was the metal clamp around his neck, and even then, it loosened up so that the mask hung just below Izuku's chin. Thanks, Hatsume. Really, this is an amazing addition to my costume. He went to take off the red scarf as well, but Kyoka stopped him at the last second. Why not keep the scarf? Kyoka suggested. You've got so much green going on that your shoes shouldn't be the only bit of red to break it up, right? You know what? That's not a bad idea. Izuku approved. Thanks, Kyoka, and thank you for creating it, Yaoyorozu. Momo bowed her head to him in return. You're very welcome, Midoriya. However, Denki couldn't help but deflate a little seeing Izuku in his costume. Man, wish we could head out in our gear. It's probably all still back at UA. Actually, May reached into her pocket and took out a remote control, pressing a big, red button in the middle. I might have thought ahead on that. Much to everyone's surprise, a set of panels in the floor began to open up, and from out of it raised a large shelving apparatus that held 11 more suitcases, each one with a different number on them. I actually took the liberty of asking Mr. Aizawa and Mr. King to have some costumes on hand at base for you guys, just in case a mission like this popped up. Whoa, seriously. Eijiro pumped a fist as he and the others quickly nabbed their own briefcases. Hatsume, you rule. Alright, Optimus, now we're ready to roll. That was what I was hoping to hear. Red alert, if you'd please. Red alert gave an affirming nod, wasting no time in opening the ground bridge. Raising his fist into the air, Prime assembled his Autobots to his side, giving his usual rallying cry as they all entered vehicle mode. Autobots, transform and roll out. Thankfully, the moment the team emerged from the portal, they were greeted by a conservation club building, where the teens proceeded to change into their hero costumes. There didn't seem to be anyone there that day, so there wasn't any risk of them being discovered, and from there, the groups divided up and went their separate ways. As they walked through the woods, Ochako couldn't help but admire Itsuka's own hero costume, being the first time she'd ever seen it. Wow, Itsuka, you really hit the ball out of the park with your costume. It's so stylish, and I love how it matches your eyes. I agree. Izuku concurred. It's so practical for your form of combat, too. Very appropriate. The redhead blushed a little at their praise. Ah, guys, no need to heap on the praise. I just wanted to go with what fit my style is all. Itsuka glanced over her costume, feeling proud about what she had gone with. It was a traditional turquoise kipao with gold trim, which she wore a black corset over the midsection that ended just under her chest. She had a brown leather belt strapped around her hips that had a satchel hanging at the back, and on her feet, she wore a set of navy blue boots with white heels and long, wide vamps that almost reached her toes, which had white inserts to finish them off. Finally, she wore a simple, black domino mask over her eyes, which was tied off on the back of her head. Overall, in her opinion it was rather simplistic, but it still feels great hearing their praise about it, she thought bashfully. Peeking over her shoulder, RC smiled down to the greenette. So, Izuku, how are you getting used to your new hero costume? Oh, it's amazing, Izuku answered, rolling his arm and shoulder to emphasize his point. I will say that it's come a long way from my mom's original design, but overall, I think it's better than ever before. Itsuka tilted her head at what he said. Wow, your mom designed your original costume, Midoriya. Yeah. Izuku squirmed with a slight redness in his cheeks. It was something. Ochako tapped on Itsuka's shoulder and whispered into her ear, hee hee, it had the cutest pair of green bunny ears you could have ever imagined, Itsuka. Deku looked adorable in it, trust me. With a yelp, Izuku tried to break up the conversation. Uraraka, please. But it was too late. Itsuka was already imagining it in her head, and she couldn't help but flash a cheeky grin to the one-for-all user. Oh, I see. It was clear that Izuku would rather move on from the subject, though, and since she was a class rep, she knew it was only fair. Itsuka cleared her throat and changed the topic. Haha, well in any case, why don't we focus on searching for that relic now, huh? Any idea where it could be? I wish I did. RC said as she took out a tracker, trying to calibrate the coordinated that Red Alert deciphered. Unfortunately, there's no prominent landmark or anything to give us a clue unlike the previous relics. If there were, this investigation would be over in a matter of minutes. Bumblebee scratched his helm. ZRKT, like lookin' for a needle in a haystack. So I guess we'll just have to hoof it, till we find something then. Flare Up exclaimed vigorously. Come on ladies, let's fan out and start searching. 2 hours later. Flare Up was lying face down on the ground, bored out of her mind. MMPH, have we found it yet? She muffled in the dirt. You're the one who was excited about this expedition. RC snapped, knocking on the back of her friend's helm. Get up, lazy struts. Bumblebee hastily got between the two, gently touching RC's arm while also helping Flare Up to her feet. ZRKT, hold on there, ladies, ZRKT, let's bring this down a notch. ZRKT, over there. The Autobot scout pointed down to the girls and Izuku, who also seemed rather tired as they reunited after a long search. ZRKT, they're plumb tuckered out, ZKRT, so let's catch our breath. The two femmes all mumbled in agreement and sat themselves down next to their respective human partners, much to B's relief. Phew, thank goodness. Ochako slumped against a tree, taking her boots off to rest her sore feet. I was about to collapse from exhaustion. RC raised an eyridge down to her. I think it'd be good for you to raise your stamina a bit, Ochako. Otherwise, hero work might be a bit much for you. The brunette seemed absolutely stunned to hear that. ARC. Come on, it's been 2 hours of non-stop walking. But the pink femme didn't let up her gaze, which made Ochako pucker her lips and look away. No fair, you're being a meanie. Hey, let's not start an argument. Izuku raised a hand to Ochako with a reassuring smile. I will say that it would be a good idea to increase our stamina, but at the same time, 2 hours of non-stop walking through the woods is exhausting work. He shifted her focus up to RC curiously. On that note, do you think we're any closer to the relic, RC? With a soft sigh, RC crossed her arms. HMPH, I genuinely don't know. I mean, we would know if we found it since there would very likely be some sort of indicator of its resting place. Itsuka shook her head. Gah, but we haven't stumbled across anything that obvious yet. Maybe we should call the others, see how they're doing. It's worth a shot, I suppose. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that none of them have tried to contact us yet. RC was about to activate her comlink, when she heard something go THOOM off in the distance, and the ground shook beneath her feet. She snapped to attention, as did the others, meaning that they also felt whatever made that tremor. Not long after, there was another, and then another, and it was making the earth quake enough to make a nearby puddle ripple. That told RC all she needed to know. Everyone, hide, now. Izuku, Bumblebee and the ladies didn't need to be told twice. Diving down into a ravine close by, the Autobots and students ducked their heads behind a log near the edge. The human girls peeked their eyes out only slightly, to see just what was doing all that shaking. Something's coming, Ochako whispered. Keep your voices low, RC advised. What'd you think it could be? Flare-Up wondered. Biting her lower lip, Itsuka feared the worst. Well, I've heard the Appalachians are home to a bunch of cryptid creatures. Wolves that expel smoke, multi-legged mountain cats, Mothman. We could be dealing with any of them. This made Ochako grow increasingly pale, while Izuku deadpanned to the redhead slightly. Kendo, please, that's all just superstition. I doubt we're dealing with any sort of. Crunch. A chill went through the six of them as they slowly brought their sights back over the log, and were met with an absolutely terrifying sight. Creature. There, squatting in the forest path they once stood in, was an absolutely enormous crocodile. A giant, metal, half-green half-magenta crocodile. The beast, from its nose to the tip of its tail, had to be at least 30 feet long. Its green front legs were big and muscular compared to its rear legs, which was only accentuated by the spiked, magenta shoulder pads it had. Its magenta tail was long and pointed at the end, and the top of its green head had a strip of magenta paint going down its snout and eye ridges. And, at the top of its head, it had a purple insignia resembling a glaring insect head. Its sharp, silver teeth gleamed in the sunlight, and its red optics glowed with malice behind them as it plodded along. The 1A girls were left quivering with each step the beast took, Ochako getting goosebumps as it hissed a low growl. What the heck is that? ZRKT, Crocs, ZRKT, why'd it have to be, ZRKT, Crocs? Bumblebee grimaced. RC grit her teeth, realizing that they were now in an emergency situation. It's a Predacon. A Preda what? Itsuka questioned. Predacon, love. Flare-Up corrected. They were Maximals native to Cybertron who sided with Megatron during the war. Felt the need to rename themselves accordingly. She peeked over the log, glaring at the beast. And, that one's the worst of the lot. A Croctobot by the name of Skullcruncher. By this point, even Izuku's resolve was beginning to dip. I do not want to know how he got that name. On the main path itself, Skullcruncher was sniffing at the air, growling in frustration as he pawed the ground with his massive claws. Grr, I could have sworn I smelled a couple Autobots out here. He said in a deep, guttural and gravely voice before taking another deep whiff. And, something else, too. Something, fleshy. The five ladies and Izuku quickly ducked down into the ravine, hoping that the Croctobot wouldn't come over there. Scrap, what do we do? Izuku muttered, his eyes darting between his teammates. Should we call Optimus? That's the best idea, for sure. RC reached up and activated her comlick. Optimus, this is RC, can you read, KKSSSCCCCHHHZZZ*, you have to be fragging kidding me. Interference. Out here. She quickly went for her wrist-mounted radar, but the moment the hologram came up, it was nothing but a bunch of static. Scrap. That's why we haven't heard from anyone yet. There's something jamming the signal. Again. Seriously. Flare-Up facepalmed. How does this keep happening? RC shook her head and deactivated her radar, thinking up a new idea. Okay, new plan, we're going to sneak away through this ravine and find Prime and the others. So long as Skullcruncher doesn't notice us, we should be. SNF. Just then, Skullcruncher's sniffing caught their attention again, and when the group peeked over the log again, they could see why. The Croctobot had located Ochako's pink boots, and he was taking in their scent thoroughly. HMPH, something smells sweet. Kind of fruity almost. Everyone's sights honed in on the gravity user, who wore a shaky smile. What can I say, I like strawberries. As quick as a flash, Skullcruncher whipped around toward the ravine, and Ochako let out an eep before ducking behind the log. The Autobots and students immediately began descending down into the ravine, with RC shouting, "Retreat." But it was far too late for that. Gotcha. Raw AWWWRR. Skullcruncher blasted into a full-on sprint and then vaulted over the log, sailing over the group's heads before slamming down on all fours at the bottom of the ravine. The Autobots stopped their downward plunge, the humans gasping at just how fast he was. "You think you can outrun ME? You all are sorely mistaken." Skullcruncher, terrorize. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHKT. With a powerful roar, Skullcruncher transformed, his croc head lifting up and then spinning 180 degrees before folding down into his back. From there, his shoulders and forelegs shifted down as the croc feet folded up onto his forearms, allowing a pair of clawed robot hands to pop out and make his arms. His tail compressed into his body before the rear of his croc mode unfurled into a pair of strong legs, revealing his white pelvis and thighs while a pair of black, two-toed feet popped out as well. He stood up straight, showing off his very broad-shouldered robot mode torso. Each of his pectorals seemed to resemble an angry eye, complete with a glowing optic in their centers. And, in the center of his chest, there was a piece of white armor that extended from his collar down to his abdomen. Finally, his head popped out, revealing his spiky, square-shaped helmet and his yellow-painted face with a jagged chin, prominent nose, and glowing red optics. Skullcruncher stomped his foot in front of the team and reached behind him, taking out his tail which had transformed into a sharp, lance-like weapon. Goin' nowhere, you hear?" The Predacon bellowed, his voice a lot less deep now that he was in robot mode. "My boss is gonna wanna see you." "What, boss?" Izuku echoed. "That's what you think, Skullcrusher." Flare-Up took out her pistols and then blinked away, appearing directly behind the Croctobot to blast him in the shoulder. "Kids, get back up on the trail. We'll hold him off for ya." RC and Bumblebee took out their respective weapons as well, approving the idea. "She's right, that's the safest place you can be right now." RC took aim and started shooting at Skullcruncher as well, with Bumblebee joining right in with his stingers. "Go, find help. We'll be right behind you." Ochako was about to protest that. What? No, But Izuku quickly grabbed her and Itsuka, placing them on his back. "No time for arguments. We've gotta go, now." Bringing full cowling up to 10%, Izuku shot right out of the ravine with the girls on his back, dashing straight over to Ochako's boots first. "Uraraka, quick, grab your boots and let's go." "Oh okay," as she put on her boots, though, Ochako tried to convince Izuku otherwise. "Deku, we can't just leave them here, and you know that." "She's right." Itsuka agreed, balling up a fist. "We have to do at least something to try and help them." But Izuku shook his head, wanting to follow orders. "Girls, I know, and I understand where you're coming from, but we're up against an unknown foe that we have no experience with. And judging from how they talked about him, I get the feeling that Skullcruncher is no joke. And even beyond that, there may be another Decepticon around here since he said he had a boss." His sights went back toward the ravine, hearing the sounds of conflict down below. "Besides, I'm sure that they can handle him long enough for us to find Optimus and PSSSSSSSSTTT. Wah. Hawk hawk hawk." Izuku, Itsuka and Ochako gave a shout as something was sprayed directly in their faces. Some sort of gaseous, purple substance that wafted through the air with a strange scent accompanying. "Hawk hawk. What the heck is this?" Ochako coughed out. "Oh, no need to worry about it, humans." The group doubled back with a gasp as they saw another bot approach through the purple fog, and they knew for sure that this one was a Decepticon thanks to the prominent symbol etched into his leg. He was a mustard yellow bot with a mostly purple torso, his blocky helm and bright purple visor giving him a distinct appearance. What's more, his smarmy grin gave him a very distrustful vibe the moment the students saw it. Unfortunately, he was also heavily armed with a large, black cannon on his right arm. The Khan spun a small handheld weapon in his hand before holstering it at his side. "That was simply my patented knockout gas. Should put the three of you out for at least 30 minutes." The Decepticon's words left the teens horrified. What? 30 Minuu, oh. Itsuka didn't even get to finish her sentence before she was out like a light. No. Itsuka. Ochako charged out at the con with her hand raised, ready to touch him and use her quirk. Don't you dare, do this, too, UNF. Just like clockwork, Ochako followed her neighbor's example, already having inhaled a fair amount of the gas. With his lips curled into a snarl, Izuku pulled his mask up and his helmet came up over his head, the excess gas from inside expelling through the holes on his mask. He brought up full cowling and leapt up above the purple haze, sailing straight toward the Decepticon with a right hook ready. You're gonna pay for Z's, but even then, it was too late. Izuku had also been exposed to the gas far too long, and he slipped into unconsciousness as well. Lifting his hand, Swindle grabbed Izuku as he fell down, before picking Ochako and Itsuka up from the ground. With all three humans piled up on one another, the Conbot reached for his abdomen and pulled it out, revealing a hidden compartment that hid his own subspace storage unit. From there, he retrieved a small spherical device and placed it above the humans, pressing a button that activated a spherical force field that trapped them inside. Well, that was easier than expected. Back in the ravine, Flare Up, Bumblebee and RC continued to lay down as much firepower as possible against Skullcruncher, though the most they did to him was singe his armor somewhat. Gura, you Autobots are a pain in my tail. He swiped his lance tail weapon around and managed to catch Bumblebee with it, sending him sprawling back. So here, let me return the favor. RC cried out, leaping up to catch her flying friend. The duo came down hard, but alive nonetheless. Are you okay? ZKRT, alright, now I'm mad. Bumblebee sprang up onto his feet and united his stingers, charging them up and letting loose a full blast of electricity toward Skullcruncher. With Flare Up serving as a distraction, his attack managed to score a direct hit onto the Croctobot's back, severely electrocuting him and making fall to his knees in pain. ZKRT, shocking, isn't it? The yellow beetle glared. Nice work, B. RC pulled out her twin swords and rushed the Predacon bruiser while he was down, more than ready to take advantage. Now, try this on for size. She bounded over Skullcruncher's back and did a mid-air flip, slicing through his shoulder pads and making him scream in pain. And on top of that, Flare Up blinked in again and delivered a kick right to the Predacon's head, making him fall flat on his back. And that's for Stocken, is in the woods. Gritting his teeth, a feeling of pure rage pounded through Skullcruncher's processor, making him bellow, beast mode. Before roaring and reverting back into crocodile mode. He grabbed a nearby rock with his jaws and hawked it right back to Bumblebee, the scout taken off guard and forced to duck, only for Skullcruncher to charge directly into him. Then, in a moment that felt like slow motion to RC and Flare Up, they saw Skullcruncher latch onto Bumblebee's arm. Flare Up immediately went to dash over and help, but it was too late. Skullcruncher lurched to his right and performed a death roll, pulling Bumblebee with him as they tumbled across the dirt. The yellow bug was practically trampled by Skullcruncher's whole body, leaving him considerably dented and scrapped up. And, right at the very end, Skullcruncher pulled B's arm out of its socket, thrashing it about as energon leaked everywhere. No. RC charged at Skullcruncher as Flare Up finally made it, both of them shooting at the beast's head. Get away from him, she cried desperately. Graw, he had it comin'. The Croctobot spat out Bumblebee's arm and went to swipe his tail at the incoming femmes, only for a familiar voice to put a stop to it all. Wait. Within seconds, Swindle came sliding down into the ravine, holding a hand up to stop not just the ladies but his associate as well. Scully, what in the scrap are ya doin'? I told you, apprehension only. Skullcruncher growled and transformed into robot mode, clenching a fist at the smaller bot. Kid, this little bot tried to offline me. What else was I supposed to do? RC and Flare Up, meanwhile were aghast by who they saw, as well as the fact that he was holding their human partners in a sphere. Swindle, RC snapped. What in the 13 primes are you doing here? Flare Up stomped her way toward the taller bot. Let go of our friends, you backstabbin', two-timin' Shannock's grubbing. Ladies, please. Swindle held up a hand, giving them both a serious face. For one thing, I can't be bought with flattery. Secondly, I would like a moment to settle something with my friend here. Patience, please. Swindle raised a finger, pointing right at Skullcruncher as RC and Flare Up glared at him. Scully, listen, I know that back in your day, things were way different when it came to wheeling and dealing, but we're trying to run a respectable business. He thrust a hand toward Bumblebee, who was having a panic attack at the sight of his arm being ripped off. Ya can't just go and do this to potential customers. Now please, go get him so we can take him back to the ship and fix him up. Flare Up did a double take at that. Wait, what? After all, we can at least charge them for fixing him up. The Autobot duo deadpanned at the same time. And there it is. RC frowned. Let me guess, you're going to barter with us so we can get our human friends back as well. Oh, no, I'm not in the human trafficking business, miss. Swindle raised the unconscious humans up in their prison sphere with a knowing smile. Rather, I would like you to follow me back to my ship, and I'm sure that me holding your little human friends would make for the perfect incentive. RC narrowed her optics. And if we refuse? Swindle winced and eyed down to the mutilated Bumblebee. Well, for one, your friend down there will lose out on the medical attention he desperately needs. And for the other, he snapped his fingers and the bubble expanded slightly in his hand, which made the kids roll around inside. I can control the size of this force field sphere to my liking. Be it making it substantially big, or incredibly small. You wouldn't. RC muttered with dread. I may not be entirely copacetic with Megatron's ambitions, but I am still a Decepticon. Swindle smirked. Anything to get a good deal. Flare Up went to lift her pistols up. You're bribing us with our friends' lives, you, The scout quickly rescinded her move as Swindle snapped his fingers again, making the sphere shrink so that it only got slightly more cramped within. See, we understand each other, don't we? Swindle motioned for them to follow with 2 fingers. Don't worry, no one's gonna get hurt if you follow me. I've got something amazing to show you all. With a deep scowl, RC had to grit her teeth and bear with the situation they were in. Bumblebee was down and needed to be patched up fast, and they foolishly let their human friends get captured. Optimus isn't going to like this. With a short sigh, RC begrudgingly accepted the terms. Fine, but you had better keep your word on both terms, Swindle. I know how you operate. Swindle responded with a shrug. Guilty as charged, but don't worry, RC. I'd never skimp out on potential clients. Scully, please pick the pieces of our little yellow friend up. Grumbling but compliant, the aged Croctobot hoisted Bee onto his shoulder and sculled up out of the ravine, with Swindle gesturing for the 2 femmes to follow his lead into the nearby woods. My ship isn't far from here. And let me tell you, I've got a deal you're gonna love. We'll see about that. RC and Flare Up proceeded forward, following the Decepticon with wary optics. However, just before they went into the forest, RC caught a glimpse of a familiar pair of wings beating overhead. There, flying high above in the sky, was Erezer, and she seemed ready to stoop down upon them. Flare Up nearly gasped, but RC swiftly covered her friend's mouth while silently signaling to Erezer not to attack. Stopping on a dime, Erezer watched as RC thrust her arm and pointed vigorously away, hoping that the bird bot would understand her message, do not engage. Go get help. Thankfully, it seemed Erezer got the picture, nodding once before flying off in a different direction. Thank Primus. Swindle peered over his shoulder at her whisper. Something the matter? Nothing, just, thankful that you're willing to repair our friend at all, considering you're a Decepticon. RC faked a hopeful grin. Don't suppose you'll allow our human companions a similar luxury. They really have nothing to do with this, you know. Swindle's lips curled into a smirk as he gave a shrug. We'll see. Once we get to the ship, I'll let you in on what I'd like in exchange for your friend's safety, among other things. It'll be a sweet deal, let me tell you. The 2 femmes scowled at the conbot as he turned back around. There'll be no deals going on if we have anything to say about it. Meanwhile, back in Japan, the hero killer, Stain, wasn't exactly having the best of times. He was just about to go after his next target in Hosu when some weird cloud man with glowing eyes asked him to come through a portal, which was actually his entire body. The cloud man, whose name was apparently Kurogiri, had taken him to an abandoned dive bar in some secret location that he wasn't clued in on. That was one red flag that managed to piss him off, the other was when he met the man with a dismembered hand covering his face. This man's name was Shigaraki, a name that Stain could swear he had heard before. Also, there was another one present, though not physically. Near the back of the small bar, there was a TV monitor on that had the words, "Sound only," in text on the screen, indicating that someone was listening in. They didn't give their name, but it was evident that they were the one in charge of the other two, given how they referred to him as Master. That was another big tip-off for Stain that this was no run-of-the-mill villain group. It wasn't long until Stain's thoughts were confirmed, though, with both Shigaraki and Kurogiri explaining why he was brought here. And from there, things began to click. "Now I get it," Stain remarked, his scarred face twisting into a sinister grin. "You must be the ones who attacked UA. And you wanna recruit me to rebuild your little group again. Yeah, it'll be great," Shigaraki said with enthusiasm. "You've got so much experience after all. I must admit, I was wondering where you all disappeared to after your failed attack." Behind his bandana mask, Stain's eyes narrowed at the duo. "Just where have you all been this entire time? Our absence from the public eye was unplanned, so to speak." The voice from the TV spoke up, with Kurogiri and Shigaraki turning to it dutifully. "There have been certain events recently that we have been investigating." Stain raised an eyebrow at that. "What kinda events?" "It began not long after our attack on the USJ." Kurogiri revealed, reaching into his shirt pocket and pulling out a set of pictures, sliding them across the table over to Stain. The meteor shower that fell upon Musudafu was where things started to get suspicious. Stain picked up the photographs and began going through them, seeing several different cars and trucks of all shapes and sizes, including a set of black ones that seemed very inconspicuous. From there, we've seen these vehicles appearing all over Japan, getting into highway chases that often lead to them disappearing as if they never happened. And we have no idea where they go afterward. Shigaraki pointed at the photos. "One of them belongs to the idiot who was partially responsible for taking out our tank, Nomu. The little retro yellow beetle." When Stain got to that photo, he did indeed see a young, blonde man sitting behind the wheel of the old model car, and he had several children in his passenger seats. And they're associated with UA students. Indeed, it would seem so. On the TV screen, the text was changed to another photo, this one seemingly taken at the sports festival. It was angled directly behind the Class 1A box, where the students were joined by several other adults, including the blonde man. My mole on the inside sent me these pictures, and we firmly believe that these are the ones who own these mysterious vehicles, at least, the ones seen most around the area. The black cars remain a mystery. They say that they are international heroes who are investigating a threat that has come to Japan, one without my knowledge. HMPH, sound like you must have your fingers in a lot of places. Stain mused as he tossed the pictures back on the bar. "Well, if you're looking for information on him, I don't know nothing." Shigaraki shook his head. "Oh, no, we don't wanna get info out of you. Our investigation into all of this has nothing to do with you. What we are interested in you for is to try and recruit you to our mission. So, what you say?" Stain raised a brow to the hand-masked man. "What is your mission, exactly? For now, I really wanna kill All Might." With a short cackle, Shigaraki pulled out another picture from his own pocket, one of the sports festival winner, Izuku Midoriya. "I like to destroy anything that pisses me off. Like this little brat here and his beetle-loving friend. Game over." The younger man's words disgusted Stain to his very core the moment he heard them. "I was a fool to think you could offer me anything." He reached down to either side of his body, where at least 4 pairs of swords were mounted and ready to be used. "It turns out, you're the type of person I despise most in this world. The goals of your league are those of a child. What meaning is there in killing if you don't have real conviction?" Kurogiri narrowed his glowing eyes at the mass murderer. The hero killer, Stain, Tamura Shigaraki cares only about wanton violence, so we brought this man in to guide him. Perhaps we've made a mistake. When he saw Stain start to pull out his blades, Kurogiri turned to the television once again. "Master, should I step in?" There was a short pause before the master replied. "Let it happen. It's possible this is the only way he'll learn anything." While no one could see him, the master could easily see the standoff that was about to happen between his protege and the hero killer, and he was more than willing to nod to anything about it. He needs to think about the ways he must grow. How he can mature. Only then, will he reach his true potential. And with that, Shigaraki and Stain lunged at each other, beginning the barroom brawl. Chapter 48, Have I Got a Deal for You? Part 2, I can't believe this. Hours. Kyoka's group had been searching for literal hours and none of them had yet to come across the relic, whatever it was. There was no sign of any sort of shrine or a hideaway or whatever the relic could have been hidden in, and the punk rocker was very quickly over all of it. She had been walking for a long time and her feet were screaming at her to stop. Guh. It feels like we've been at this for decades. Kyoka exclaimed, her hand flying up over her eyes. Above her, both Jazz and Windblade weren't exactly impressed with the young girl's complaining. Kyoka, it's been 2 hours. Windblade stated. And we've been walking that whole time. Kyoka snapped, sitting up as she pouted up to the city speaker. We're humans with muscles, not robots with struts. We get tired, we need a break. While I'm not as frustrated as her about this, I do have to agree, Windblade. Momo concurred, lifting her leg to flex her sore ankles and knees. We should stop for at least a moment to rest and gather our bearings, because we're obviously not getting anywhere with our current method of searching. Windblade hummed in thought before Jazz piped in himself. I think Momo's got a point there, Wins. Though he also spared an unimpressed frown down to his own partner. And while I don't exactly approve of her way of expressing her frustration, Kyo's right, too. We'd better let these gals rest a bit before they collapse or something. As much as she didn't want to admit it, Jazz and the others were right. They were getting nowhere fast with how they were searching, so it was probably best to put a pause on that for now and switch up their tactics. Plus, they had sent Eraser ahead to scout from the air, so it was probably better to wait until she came back with any news. Would have liked to go myself, but even I'll acknowledge that a bird in the mountains is a lot less conspicuous than a jet. Giving a sigh, Windblade nodded in approval. Alright, let's wait for Eraser, then. Hopefully she'll have better luck than us. Kyoka smiled and pumped a fist. Yes, thank God. She propped herself up against a nearby tree as she took out her phone, going straight to her GPS. Now, let's see if I can get an actual read on our location. Wait, no bars. It's the mountains, Kyoka. Momo deadpanned. What did you expect? Bad enough that the comm links aren't working, again. Hey yeah, what's that about, anyway? Kyoka asked the bots. Doesn't that mean there's some sorta signal jammer? Wait, you don't think the cons are here, do you? Jazz shook his head. Unlikely. If they were, they for sure would have swarmed us by now. His hand went to his chin, scratching it ponderously. Still, this whole situation does have a real con stench, don't it? Eric. Everyone's sights were suddenly drawn up to the sky as the unmistakable screech of a falcon echoed through the mountain range, and before long, Eraser swooped down from high above the trees. The very second she landed, Windblade met her with a nod. Eraser, glad you made it back. Find any sign of the relic? Unfortunately, I haven't, Windblade. Eraser said as she maximized into robot mode, where everyone could see that she was quite worried. But I'm afraid that we have a bigger problem on our hands now. The group's undivided attention was given to the bird bot, with Windblade's lips tightening. What is it? What's the matter? As I was passing through back toward where we split up, I came across RC's group, and they were being led into the deep forest by a pair of suspicious bots. Seeing their interest piqued, Eraser pressed 2 fingers to her temple and began projecting a screen from her optics, which showed the footage of what she saw just moments before. Here, this is what they looked like. Little by little, the image zoomed in on the group that were leading RC and flare up into the woods, and it didn't take long for the Autobots to recognize the pair of troublemakers. Oh, you've gotta be fragging me. Jazz uttered. Windblade curled her lips in distaste. Swindle. And Skullcruncher. Now they're here. But down below, Kyoka had taken notice of what Swindle had in his hand. Izuku, Ochako and Itsuka all trapped in an energy sphere of sorts. And what was worse, Bumblebee was heavily injured and being carted off on Skullcruncher's back, no doubt hurt by the Decepticons in question. No. They have Izuku, B and the girls. She narrowed her eyes at Jazz. I told you there were Decepticons here. Okay, I'll take the L on this one. Jazz conceded. But of all bots, I wasn't expecting those two scammers. Scammers? Momo questioned. Swindle prides himself on being a salesman first and a Decepticon second. Windblade explained. If he can make a deal off of it, you can expect to see him appealing to the highest bidder, be it Autobot or Decepticon. Thankfully, that means it's unlikely that he'll actually hurt our friends, seeing them as potential buyers. Kyoka snapped her finger up to Bumblebee. Oh yeah, well tell that to poor B. That was probably Skullcruncher's doing, actually. Jazz elaborated further. He's an old bot who's also a scam artist, but he's, well, a lot more prone to con tendencies than his smooth-talkin' protege. Windblade folded her arms. Thankfully, Swindle's generous enough to repair any bot Skullcruncher rips apart, if only to gain the good graces of his customers. But still, the fact that he wants to make any sort of deal with them is sending up a lot of red flags. The raven-haired creation user tilted her head. Okay, so what would he want them to buy? Erizar cleared her throat, bringing everyone back to her. Well, as much as I don't want to fear the worst, considering that he just so happens to be in this area. He could have found the relic. Windblade finished with a harrowing chill coursing through her spark. Her irises furrowed toward the maximal, her voice carrying an extreme amount of weight behind it. Erizar, I need you to show us exactly where you saw them headed. If the relic is potentially dangerous, there's no telling what Swindle could do. Of course. Everyone, follow me. Jumping into the air, Erizar transformed back into beast mode and flew high into the sky, with Windblade transforming after her. Jazz, with a quick breakdance, transformed into vehicle mode as well, opening his doors for the girls. Come on ladies, this just turned into a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Izuku Midoriya could feel his head pounding as he returned to consciousness, and the fact that he still had his helmet on didn't help that much. Whatever that Decepticon sprayed me with is really giving me a, wait. Izuku's eyes snapped open and he went to sit up, realizing the situation he was in, only to feel a ton of weight pushing down on him. Though at the same time, it was oddly soft. Gah, what the, reaching up, he deactivated his helmet, allowing himself to get a better look at what was weighing him down, only to be met with Ochako and Itsuka's faces, their bodies pressed directly against his as they were still unconscious. Instantly, Izuku's cheeks lit up as red as a tomato, letting out a little yelp before bringing his hand up over his mouth. Don't panic, Izuku, don't panic. You just gotta, scooch your way out of this. He started an attempt to do so, when the two girls began to stir anyway. Eep. MHA. Ochako rubbed the haze out of her eyes, just barely able to make out Izuku. Deku. Where are we? Itsuka muttered. What happened? However, once both girls were fully conscious, they took notice of their rather precarious position on Izuku's body. After a few seconds, both of their complexions became as red as his and they shot off of him, Itsuka giving an embarrassed scream as she hid behind her hands. I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Midoriya. Deku, I had no idea what the heck was happening. Ochako stammered, flailing her hands around in a panic. I promise, I don't know how we ended up like. You Uraraka, it's okay. Izuku ensured, still a bit flustered, but more collected now that they were off of him. Honestly, it is. I'm just glad the two of you are okay. Both girls moved their heads away sheepishly, though they kept their eyes on Izuku as he stood up. It was only then that the three of them noticed they weren't on solid ground. Instead, they were standing on some sort of hard light floor, which curved up and over their heads. Seeing this, Itsuka stood as well and tapped against the glowing walls, causing a ripple effect through the whole thing. What is this? Izuku craned his head upward, seeing some sort of disc-shaped device hovering over their prison. If I had to guess, we're trapped. Ochako popped up to her feet, balling her hands into fists as her prior embarrassment was completely forgotten about. That Decepticon. It's his fault we're in here, wherever here is. She peered through the clear energy field to try and take in their surroundings. They seemed to be in a ship of some sort, and along the walls were weapons as far as the eye could see. Granted, Ochako had no idea what a lot of these guns and blades did, but she had been around Cybertronian weaponry long enough to know they could do some damage. Whoever this ship belongs to, they're quite the collector. Itsuka noted. Think it's that Skullcruncher guy's boss that he was talking about. Very likely. Izuku agreed. That yellow bot who knocked us out, he seems to be the brains of the bunch. Her eyes full of worry, Ochako turned to the others. Wait, RC, Flare Up and Bumblebee, what do you think happened to them? Izuku pursed his lips, pondering that himself. Well, if that Decepticon managed to capture us, he probably used our lives as a bargaining chip to get the Autobots to surrender. Izuku raised a fist and began charging up full cowling, ready to bust them out of here if it was the last thing he'd do. They could be on the ship as we speak, but don't worry, I'm gonna get us out of here. He reared his hand back and thrust it straight into the wall, only for the kinetic energy to be absorbed and redirected back at him, blasting him straight into the other side of the sphere. Gah! Deku! Ochako and Itsuka rushed over, seeing Izuku clutching his arm. Hey, are you okay? I think so. Carefully removing his glove, Izuku gave a sigh of relief, thankful that didn't break his hand. But I think it's gonna be tougher to get out of here than I thought. Itsuka nodded, giving the energy sphere around them a frustrated look. Well, we certainly know that brute forcing our way out of here isn't going to work. She craned her head up toward the device that was projecting the sphere itself, gritting her teeth slightly at its annoying position. Grr, what's worse is that we can't get to that projector thingy from here. So, we're stuck here? Ochako asked. Until one of the Autobots manages to rescue us. Itsuka sighed. Maybe so. Not far away on the bridge of the same ship, RC and Flare Up were both glaring daggers at the Croctobot who was keeping watch over them. Or at least, was keeping a semi-watch over them. Skullcruncher was currently reclining in his pilot's chair, comping down on a smoking cigar as he chortled away at whatever he was reading on that datapad of his. Of course, given any other opportunity, both femmes would have taken the opportunity to jump him and take him out. But, given that Swindle was working on repairing Bumblebee, they weren't about to chance that if it meant risking the safety of their friend. But that didn't make Skullcruncher's laughing any less irritating for them. Bahahaha. Oh ho ho, boy, Thundertron. You and your crew just keep surprising the pit out of me. With a delighted grin, he turned around in his seat and showed his datapad to the ladies. Dia see this headline recently. We haven't had any sorta extranet connectivity since coming to this planet. Flare Up dryly replied. What'd you think? No need to get her tailpipe in a twist. Here. Skullcruncher stood up and walked over, showing the headline to them. RC placed her hands on her hips as she read it aloud. Star Seekers continue to plunder the Milky Way. She grimaced at the rest of the article. As the ragtag group of former Decepticons sail across the star systems, they continue to pillage planets of their treasures and conquer them one by one. Often, once they're done with a planet, that leaves more Decepticons to easily come in and finish what they started. And unlike the Star Seekers, they take no prisoners. Her optics narrowed up at Skullcruncher. Are you telling me you're proud of this? The Croctobot smirked at her question. Little bit. Thundertron and I go way back. Used to be a team of treasure hunters before he went and founded the Star Seekers. He flashed his sharp teeth and scoffed. Hey, best part is we never know when we'll run into each other, so whenever we do, we make a game out of who can get the best treasure first. And, if you go after the same one? Flare Up questioned. We fight for it, like good Decepticons do. Skullcruncher balled a fist with a laugh. Haha, just like the good old days. Kinda wish Swindle would learn to pick up on that. Kid's got the soul of a good con bot, but he cares way too much about the deal and not about fightin' for what you got. Isn't the actual deal really important, though? Skullcruncher hastily nodded. Oh, well yeah, course it is. But the kid lacks any sort of fightin' spirit, and I'm tryin' to drill that into him. After all, if you're not willin' to fight for what you're sellin', then what's the point? RC scratched her helm, failing to see the point of his words, but nonetheless agreed to make sure they didn't spur his wrath. I suppose I can see what you're saying, from a certain point of view. But then, Flare Up shrugged. Me personally. Not gettin' it. RC glared daggers at her for that remark. What? Just bein' honest. I mean, Swindle's part o' the Combaticons, ain't he? Shouldn't he already be used to fightin'? Skullcruncher grumbled. Let's just say there's a reason why he left Onslaught and the others a long time ago. I don't expect you Autobots to get it. We're all goody two-peds anyway, The Croctobot trailed off as the door to the bridge opened, and in walked Swindle wiping some energon off of his hands. The femmes set their sights onto him as Skullcruncher approached his boss protege. "Well, kid, how'd he come out?" "Well, I bring very good news for the ladies over there." Swindle spoke with his usual salesman smile, which only served to disconcert RC and flare up all the more. "Your little yellow friend has had a very quick and very successful surgery. Thankfully, a lot of his usual parts were intact and the ones that needed replacing were fairly inexpensive. So you know what? I'm gonna let him have this tune-up free of charge." Almost all at once, everyone in the room shouted, "Free!" Before Skullcruncher lunged forward and got right in Swindle's face. "Kid, what the frag are you doing? We usually pinch the very last Shanix out of any repair." But Swindle merely rolled his optics. Scully, haven't ya heard of the term, sweetening the deal? I'm trying to win these lovely ladies over, ya feel me? Kid, ya can't go around being nice to every pretty femme ya see, we talked about this. Hey, I'm not nice to every pretty femme. Remember that rich girl on Sonoroja that I scammed out of her entire fortune for a bogus, magic rock? Haha, best trick I ever pulled, honest to Primus. Swindle clasped his hands together as he circled around Skullcruncher, making his way over to RC and flare up. "Oh, but I wouldn't do that to you, ladies. Consider my free repair a thank you for hearing me out and following me back here. So, are you ready to listen to my deal I've got going?" Glancing toward one another, RC and Flare Up were certain that they'd end up regretting this very soon. But still, it was better than being hunted down by Skullcruncher, and with any luck, Erazor would be bringing backup soon. So, until then, they might as well. Giving a sigh, RC gave the go-ahead. "Alright, Swindle, we'll bite. What exactly are you trying to pawn off on us?" "I'm glad you asked." Swindle exuberantly jogged back over to the door, which opened for him once again. "Come and follow me, I've got a lot of excellent product to show you." With Skullcruncher bringing up the rear, RC and Flare Up followed the salesman through the ship's small hallways, before then arriving in another room filled with tons of treasures. The two Autobots couldn't help but go wide-eyed and slack-jawed at the amount of valuable technology and artifacts from different planets that were lining the walls, all of them from different alien planets. "Whoa, you sure got a lot of stuff to sell," Flare Up said, impressed at the massive stash. "Oh ho ho, no, miss, you're mistaken," Swindle corrected. "This is my personal collection. I might be a salesman, but I'd be stupid to sell all of the stuff I come across." He pointed to a certain weapon on the wall, one that was very familiar. "You see that baby? That's the very sight of the large, black firearm made RC and Flare Up sparks grow cold. It was a weapon that every Autobot feared, and with good reason. That's a fusion cannon," RC screamed. Flare Up zipped to the other side of the room in fear. "How in the bloody, Primus damned frag did you get that?" Swindle couldn't help but chuckle at their reactions. HM, surprised. "I know, it's unexpected, but let's just say that Megatron doesn't need to have all of the power at just his fingertips." The Combaticon reached up and pat the fusion cannon on its barrel. "This little baby is my insurance policy, to make sure that no one steals my product, or for any con searching for me, it serves as a warning to leave and not speak of my whereabouts to anyone." "Wow, you really don't want anyone knowing where you are, do you?" RC stated. The con's expression soured. "Let's just say that, if the wrong Decepticon caught wind that I was here, then my business would be kaput. Would rather not let that happen, thank you. Which brings up the question, what are you doing on Earth?" Flare Up asked. The salesman's iriges rose at that. "Huh, is that how it's pronounced? I thought it was, Earth." Skullcruncher could only shrug. Still sounds stupid to me. "Ahem, well, as much as I'd rather not risk the chance of a Decepticon platoon finding me, I had caught wind that this sector of the galaxy was getting very lively, so I decided to take a little jaunt this way and see what I could find." Extending his arms out, Swindle grinned to his guests. "And what'd you know it? I end up coming across all of you Autobots. Along with some interesting finds not 3 megacycles after I landed here in these mountains." Instantly, the two femmes felt their energon run cold at what that likely meant. Interesting finds," RC repeated. Swindle's smirk increased. Ah, I had a feeling you were also on the hunt for this treasure. Which is why I'm lucky I ran into you. Come with me to the next room over, please. Strolling past Swindle's collection and into the adjacent room, the Autobots were greeted by even more weaponry lining the walls, including several repeats. There were also some select pieces of general technology that all seemed incredibly complex, leaving RC and Flare Up with little idea of how they worked. Welcome to my, for sale, room. And in here, I have exactly what you're searching for. Swindle went over to a table and took up a long, black box, presenting it to the two before opening it up. And inside was something that left the bots speechless. It was a metal feather. But not just any metal feather, it was a feather from the wing of the beast titan Eucharis herself, its golden sheen shining brightly even through the lit room. At the tip, however, it was modified to have a metal point that glowed bright blue, which gave it the great distinction of being a writing tool. Blimey, Flare Up whispered. Is that Alpha Trion's quill? RC exclaimed, taking a step forward only for Swindle to immediately close the box. The pink femme snarled up at him. Swindle, do you have any idea how significant that artifact is? Oh, believe me, I do. Swindle affirmed, holding up the locked box with admiration. The great sage Alpha Trion used this very quill to write down every single solitary piece of Cybertronian history in the Yakin Hall of Records. The same one that your leader, Orion Pax, worked and studies in under the watchful gaze of Trion himself. He put the box in two hands again and spun it around playfully, which only further angered the intelligence officer. Which is why I'm hoping that Prime will pay big bucks for this, his mentor's prized possession. It belongs in a museum. RC roared back. Skullcruncher gave a shrug, blowing out smoke from his cigar. Haha, and maybe it will, provided you bots'll pay the right price for it. At this point, RC's engine was revving big time, her optics flickering from blue to yellow as her anger began to boil over. But Flare Up was, for once, the calmer mind in this scenario, and quickly tried to calm her friend down. Whoa, easy there, love, let's not overheat, K. Flare soothed the savage beast that threatened to come out of RC until she was calm again, leading the scout to narrow her optics at Swindle. Listen, as much as we don't wanna pay Swindle's price, if it gets us that relic and us outta here, then we've got little choice. You're right, I suppose. RC conceded, raising her nose up to the con bot. What are you asking for it? Oh, not much, Swindle shook his head, but kept his slag-eating grin, just a measly 10,000 Shaniks. And RC's optics flipped to yellow again. 10,000. Flare Up yelped as she quickly held RC back, her flailing arms threatening to wring Swindle's neck. RC, no. Down girl. She peered past her shoulder, giving Swindle an incredulous gaze. But seriously, are you daft? We're refugees who've been bouncing from planet to planet. We barely got any Shaniks to our names. But that doesn't mean you don't have any, right? Swindle inquired as Skullcruncher chortled next to him. I'm sure if all of you Autobots pulled together what you've got, I'm sure we can come to an agreement. RC was practically thrashing by now, heaving deeply trying to break free. Why you have no shame, you money-grubbing scrap collector. Hey, none this is scrap, lady. Skullcruncher refuted, giving a knowing grin over to his boss. If y'all want some proof of that, why not show him what else we found, kid? Ya know, try to sweeten the deal. Swindle brightened up at the idea. Oh, yes, that's right. Alright, ladies, here's the new deal. I'll cut down the price of the quill to 9,000 Shaniks. And in return, Swindle pressed a button on a nearby console, which opened up to reveal 3 mini-con panels, which snapped RC out of her rage and made Flare Up gasp. I'll throw in these 3 mini-cons that we found along the mountain range for a measly 300 Shaniks each. The ladies glared upon Swindle in disgust. That's still 10,000 Shaniks. Screamed RC. Technically it's 9,900 Shani. Don't care. Flare Up, still holding RC back, gave a sneer and asked, wait a nanoclick, you said you weren't in the trafficking business. Human trafficking, I'm not in human trafficking. Swindle corrected, gesturing toward the green panels that were protected by a force field. Mini-cons, though, I have less shame in selling into humble servitude to a potential buyer. After all, they live to serve, don't they? Not like this. RC belted out. They're partners, not slaves. Even if you don't like to think it, Swindle, you're one of the worst Decepticons out there. She reached down and managed to pull out one of her energy swords, even with Flare-Up holding her in place. We're taking the Quill, and the mini-cons. You're not getting any deal out of us. Swindle's smile diminished considerably, but not enough to go away completely. With a simple shrug, he turned away and hummed. Well, if that's your final answer, then suit yourselves. Really wish we could have taken the diplomatic approach to this, but obviously, I made a mistake going after you first. Swindle raised a hand, pressing his fingers together. Guess I'll have to make a new deal with your boss. Snap. The very second Swindle clicked his fingers, two metal slabs rose up from the floor on the other side of the room, with crackling energy tethers shooting out of all four of their corners. The tethers slinked around RC and Flare-Up's wrists and ankles, making the two gasp before they were forcibly pulled back and slammed onto the slabs fairly hard. Ow! RC cried as she dropped her energy sword, all while Skullcruncher approached her. The Croctobot picked up the blade and then held his palm out, activating a magnet in his hand that attracted all of the duo's weapons. Sorry about this, ladies, but when a deal goes sour, we can't take chances. But thankfully this can be salvaged. Swindle pointed out, setting the Quill's storage box back in its protective container, along with returning the mini-con panels back into the console as well. Because now that I have you and your little yellow friend, Optimus Prime is bound to pay out the wazoo for your safety, the mini-cons and the artifact. However, Flare-Up wore a superior grin at Swindle's postulating. That's what you think, but I can get out of air in a jiffy. Her energy core began glowing and Flare-Up blinked in and out of existence briefly, but then she received a very painful shock from her energy shackles, eliciting a bloody scream. Yah! Flare! RC whipped her head around, her glare finding its way back to Swindle. You are so going to pay for this, Swindle. Oh no, RC, Optimus is gonna be paying. Quite the hefty price, might I add. He approached the intelligence officer, slowly bringing a finger up to her cheek. Gotta say, I've heard lots of stories about your latent anger, RC. You're famous for being one of the friendliest bots around, but push the wrong buttons and chomp. Eep. RC had bit at his finger, and she wasn't happy that he managed to pull away in time. That is what happens when you cross ME the wrong way. Gah, well, good to know you're just as barbaric as the other cons say you are. Swindle waved the pink femme off, ushering for Skullcruncher to follow him. Come on Scully. Let's find out where Prime is so he can buy his glitches back. With an affirming grumble, Skullcruncher followed, leaving the two Autobots in the room with little hope of escape. Flare-Up hung her head low, her joints aching after the intense shock. I'm sorry, RC. I can't help but feel this is my fault. But RC shook her head, her optics flickering back to blue as she gave a heavy sigh. No, for once, this is on me. If I hadn't told the kids to go and find help, they wouldn't have run into Swindle, and I once again let my temper get the better of me here and now. She glanced toward her friend with a sympathetic gaze. So don't feel bad for yourself, Flare-Up. I'm the one at fault here. Pursing her lips, Flare-Up sighed and put on a hopeful smile. Well, if anything, we've still got some hope, right? Erazor should be air soon. And, with any luck, she and her team can break us out of this place. Yeah, RC brought her sights toward the storage units holding the Quill and the mini-cons, a feeling in her spark telling her that something wasn't right. Hopefully. Meanwhile, outside of the Cybertronian ship, Jazz, Windblade, Kyoka and Momo were hiding in the foliage surrounding the clearing it was in, staring intently at the large craft. Up above, Erazor was circling around the spaceship, taking note of every angle before going into a deep dive toward the ground. She darted through the treetops and transformed as she landed, crouching low next to the others. Okay, this ship is quite heavily fortified. The birdbot explained, pointing up and toward the rear of it. However, there is a ventilation shaft on the upper back that is small enough for a human to possibly climb into. Wait, why's there a vent in the first place? Kyoka asked, tilting her head. You guys don't really need to breathe air, right? You'd be surprised how many corrosive gases are out in space, Kyo. Jazz enlightened. And a lot of them can affect Cybertronians, or even Cybertronian tech, which I'm sure Swindle's got a lot of in that tub. Satisfied with the answer, Kyoka gave a nod. Good enough for me. So, shall we get this little breakout started? Windblade furrowed her irises at the ship. She wasn't exactly all that thrilled about having to send Momo and Kyoka ahead of them, but doing anything else risked them getting caught by the two cons, and they couldn't afford that right now. Yes, we should. She reached down and clasped a hand on the girl's shoulders. Now listen closely, here's what you're going to do. You'll search for Bumblebee and Izuku's team, free them, and then spring a surprise attack on the cons. With any luck, that'll allow you or one of the others to find the ship controls and then open the hatch for us to come in and bring Swindle's entire operation crashing down on him. Am I clear? It's a sound plan, Windblade. Momo said with a smile. We'll do our best. Kyoka gave a thumbs up. Alright, Eraser, bring them up. At Windblade's word, Eraser transformed back into her beast mode and lowered her back down for the girls to climb on. Then, as swiftly and quietly as possible, the Falcon Maximal flew them up to the rear of the ship, where she tore off the vent and lowered them into it. Before they left, Eraser whispered, "Best of luck, ladies. We'll be waiting for you." Giving an affirming nod to her, Kyoka and Momo ventured deep into the vents, wherein Eraser flew away before she was discovered. Thankfully, these vents were much larger than both girls were expecting. They had been dreading to crawl through a tight, cramped space, but miraculously, these vents were big enough for them to both walk and stand side by side without worry. Still, they were still dark, so Momo created a flashlight as they pressed further in. Hopefully we don't end up lost. The creation user expressed her worry, shining her flashlight across the walls. We don't exactly know where we're going, after all. Yao Momo. Kyoka moved her jacks up, flexing them for emphasis. You forgetting who you're with. With me around, we'll find the others no problem. Seeing her friend's smile of realization, Kyoka grinned back and plugged a jack into the metal wall. Just give me a sec. With any luck, the punk rocker closed her eyes, concentrating on the sound vibrations going through the ship, until she heard the unmistakable sound of voices. Will we ever get out of here? Ooh, it's starting to feel really claustrophobic. It's okay, Ochako. I'm sure that RC and the others must be working on our escape. Yeah, and if anyone else notices we're missing, they'll have to send out a search party. Kyoka brightened up when she heard those voices, especially that last one in particular. Found ya, green bean. She unplugged from the wall, motioning for Momo to follow her. Come on, they're this way. Taking the lead, Kyoka dashed through the cubic tunnels, assured that Momo was following thanks to the light. After making several turns, they made it to a rather large grate that led into a room below, light shining through as the voices became much clearer. It was very apparent that Ochako distressed as she argued, yeah, but what if this ship's got some kinda cloak or something? And what if RC and the others are captured too? We may never get out of here. Momo furrowed her brow, eyeing the screws holding the grate in place and creating a screwdriver with the appropriate head. Not on our watch. Kyoka, be ready to lift and move this. Kyoka gave a nod to go ahead, wrapping her jacks around the metal piece as Momo unscrewed the panel. Once they were all out, Kyoka yanked the large panel off and set it to the side, impressed by her own strength. Wow, knew all that tensile strength training with Jazz would be worth. Excellent work. Momo commended, creating a very long rope and tying one end around the panel. Come on, down we go. Down below, Izuku gasped and called out to whoever made that loud, clattering sound. Who's there? Come out and show yourselves. Not one moment passed before he spotted something out of place. A new hole was in the ceiling where a ventilation grate was supposed to be, and he broke out into a happy smile the moment he saw who was descending down from it by a rope. Kyoka, Yaoyorozu. Ochako and Itsuka's eyes widened in shock before they too were all smiles, standing up as the girls made it to the floor. You're here, Ochako exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. How did you find us? Eraser spotted all of you in a bit of trouble from the sky. Kyoka explained, making her way toward the center table that they trapped on. RC had her come and get us. Don't worry, we're going to get you out of there. Momo promised, though her tone became more uncertain the longer she stared at the force field prison they were in. Somehow. But Kyoka was much more confident. Oh, we will. And I know exactly how. Kyoka plugged her jacks into her wrist-mounted speakers and blasted out a cacophonous burst toward the ground, pumping her legs at the same time to do a sound-boosted jump onto the table. She jogged up to the force field generator and immediately stuck her jacks into it with a self-assured smirk. Let's see how this Swindles tech feels about this beat. Bomb. Letting loose another burst of sound, the generator instantly started convulsing, sparking and rattling about, destabilizing the mechanics inside and causing the sphere trapping the other 3 students to disappear completely. With the device fully disabled, Kyoka tossed it away, only to be met with a grateful hug from Ochako. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was worried we'd never get out of there. Whoa, easy, Chako, you're good. Kyoka gave the brunette a pat on the back, attempting to soothe her. Everything's gonna be okay. She set her sights onto Izuku and Itsuka, the two also smiling at her gratefully. So, you guys ready to screw over Swindle's plan? Is that his name? Itsuka asked. HMPH, perfect name for a Decepticon. Izuku's expression soured. I had a feeling I didn't like him. He seemed really smarmy. From the sounds of it, he is. Kyoka confirmed. But before we find RC and flare up, we gotta make sure B's okay. That Croctobot ripped off his arm according to Eraser, so. What? Izuku shouted, activated One for All in a split second before zipping around and putting all 3 girls onto his back, his concern for his friend outweighing his sheepish tendencies. Why didn't you say so in the first place? Come on, let's go. The One for All user dove down, scooped up Momo and put her on his back as well, and then zoomed out of the room, the girls all crying out in surprise. ZRKT, all by myself, don't wanna be, all by myself, anymore. Bumblebee often found himself doing this when he was upset. Playing power ballads to help try and cheer up. It had been a recurring thing ever since Kyoka had shown him the wonders of expressing himself through music, and for the most part, it really helped. But in this situation, things seemed bleak, no matter what kind of music he played. He even tried playing Hearts on Fire to try and motivate himself to break the cufflinks holding him onto the medical table, but he wasn't strong enough to break them. Hanging his head low, Bumblebee thought to himself, there's no amount of montage music that can get me out of this one. I need a miracle. But then, almost as if to answer his plea, he heard a faint "B" from outside past the door, making his head perk up. There was no mistaking it, that was Izuku's voice. Primus, thank you. B pumped the volume up on his speakers, though not too high as to not risk Swindle catching on, and let Skillet do the talking for him. ZKRT, I need a hero, to save me now, a hero to save me just in time. Not 2 seconds later, the door to the med bay opened, revealing a relieved Izuku, Ochako and Itsuka, and surprisingly, Kyoka and Momo as well. B, you're okay. Izuku dashed up to the medical table and jumped up, latching into his robot friend by the shoulder. I'm glad to see you alive, partner. ZRKT, pleasure doing business with ya. ZRKT, now let's get the hell out of here. The girls slowly walked in as well, with Kyoka noting how B's arms seemed totally fine. They did a surprisingly good job fixing you up, B, the punk rocker tilted her head. But, if I'm being honest, that doesn't make much sense. Yeah, you'd think they'd just let you die. Itsuka agreed. Why would Decepticons repair you? As Izuku tore off Bumblebee's metal shackles, the yellow bot dropped down to the floor, rubbing his sore joints. ZRKT, I'm the freakin' ZRKT, collateral. ZRKT, they think they can use me as a bargaining chip. Hearing that, Ochako tightened her lips and stomped her foot. Oh, that is so mean. It's one thing to keep us trapped, but using poor B to bribe our friends. That's completely messed up. Momo gave a resolute nod at that. Exactly. Which is why we should make our way to the others and set them free as well. Everyone's eyes were trained on her as she explained the plan. Then, we need to find the opening controls for the primary hatch, which is when Jazz, Windblade and Eraser will storm in so we can overwhelm Swindle and Skullcruncher all at once. ZRKT, I like this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Bumblebee agreed as he jumped in the air and transformed into Beetle mode. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHKT. ZRKT, now, let's do it, to it, He opened his doors and allowed everyone to climb in, with Izuku and Kyoka taking the front seats while everyone else climbed in the back. ZKRT, get ready ya couple of mooks. ZRKT, you're about to get stung. B quickly drove out of the medbay and practically zoomed through the ship, his tires screeching all along the way. It didn't take long for them to reach their destination, though, as at the very end of the hall, they came upon a room and were greeted by two things upon entering, one being a wall that was absolutely chock-full of weapons. From blasters to swords to axes and even flails and maces, all of them appearing incredibly advanced. And the other thing, RC, Ochako gasped. Flare up. Itsuka shouted as well, the two girls climbing out of Bumblebee as he pulled to a stop. On their own slabs, RC and Flare Up were astonished to say the least. K kids. B. How did you, where did you? RC was cut off as Kyoka chuckled, she and Momo climbing out of the car followed by Izuku. Bumblebee transformed as the earphone jack user proudly twirled her jack around her finger. HM, as a certain someone would say, the cavalry is here. Flare Up threw her head back and gave a laugh. Ha ha, indeed they are. She grinned over to her pink friend. There, ya see, nothing to worry about. Ha, I guess not. RC admitted with a sigh, only to eye her electric cuffs with trepidation. Although, it won't be easy getting us out of these energy restraints. Bumblebee transformed into robot mode, shaking his head as he brought out his stingers. ZRKT, don't forget about me. The little yellow scout circled behind the two slabs and located their energy generators, only to stab his stingers directly into them and start draining the energy all at once. It didn't take long for the restraints to dissipate and allow RC and Flare Up to drop to the ground, in which everyone gave a victorious cheer. Haha, woo. And thus, everyone is A-okay. Kyoka gave a thumbs up. ZRTK, Houston, getting everybody's attention, Bumblebee stepped out from behind the slabs, where everybody saw that his arms were glowing a bright blue and had energy sparks dancing across them. We have a problem. A brief, stunned silence permeated through the room as RC raised her hands to her yellow friend. B, don't panic. But if you don't let that energy loose, you may blow up. What? The humans all shouted. I said don't panic. Flare Up's hands flew to her helm as the terror began to set in. B, but his stingers can't possibly expel that much energy all at once. They'll blow up with him. RC's optics darted around the room, hoping that there would be something in there to help them in this situation. Well then, her sights landed on a certain weapon that was hung on the wall. It was on the short side, but it was also fairly hefty looking, shaped like a cylinder with 4 prongs on its barrel. It also lacked a handle, but that didn't stop RC from going over, taking the weapon off the wall and bringing it over to Bumblebee with a hopeful grin. We'll just use this. What is it? Itsuka asked. Your standard issue plasma cannon. RC proclaimed as she slipped the non-lethal end of it over Bumblebee's arm, and from there, it began integrating into his systems. The prongs even rotated and took on a new yellow coloration to match his own. All of the warrior-class bots on Cybertron use them. Alright now, B, I want you to concentrate all of that energy into your cannon and shoot it straight up through the ceiling. Izuku's brows furrowed in concern. B, but won't that alert Swindle and Skullcruncher? Yes, and we'll only have a cycle at most to make a plan. RC admitted. But it's better than all of us blowing up with Bumblebee, right? She received a collective nod from everyone, prompting B to do the deed. Okay then, let it loose, B. Closing his optics, Bumblebee brought all of the collected energy into his right arm, the plasma cannon rotating as the prongs extended outward to compensate. ZRKT, fire in the hole. Bumblebee whipped his arm up and BWAAAAAAMMM. Everyone ducked as a massive beam of blue light punctured the roof and blasted through the hull of the ship. It wasn't anything that the bots could easily climb out of, but they could just barely make out the blue of Earth's sky through the hole. The group blinked, shocked at how powerful the plasma beam was. B, I think it's safe to say you got one hell of an upgrade. Kyoka smirked. ZKRT, please, hold your applause. Bumblebee said as she shifted his new weapon into his arm. ZRKT, at least until, ZRKT, we get the hell out of here. Ochako raised her hand to ask a question. Yeah, about that, should we keep looking for the relic once we're out of here? I don't think it's exactly safe to search the mountain anymore. RC brightened up at the inquiry as she stepped over to the console, searching for a certain button. Oh, don't worry about that, Ochako. We won't have to go far. She pressed the button Swindle had before and, from out of the console, the box containing the relic emerged, along with all 3 mini-con panels. Tada! 1 relic and some very worthwhile bonuses. Bumblebee and the humans were flabbergasted. You're joking, Momo uttered. He found the relic and 3 mini-cons on this mountain. This Swindle guy is either really good at his job or gets extremely lucky. Izuku stated. Speaking of, we should probably come up with a plan before they get right. Flare-Up pointed out. Taking up the relic, RC turned to Bumblebee with it, intent on handing it to him. Right, Bumblebee, I want you to take this along with Ochako and Itsuka. You 3 will stand next to the door and wait until Swindle and Skullcruncher get here. She craned her head down to the brunette and redhead, who nodded in solidarity. Once they come through, you'll take them and get to the front hatch, letting the others in. Bumblebee gave a salute. ZRKT, I won't let you down, princess. But the moment that came out of his radio, the little bug flinched in realization, spinning around in fear as RC's own optics shot open, also somewhat flustered. Good. RC cleared her throat, failing to notice Kyoka, Momo and the other girls all snickering at the little moment. As for the rest of us, we're going to face them down here. Izuku, you, Kyoka and Momo will work on getting those mini-cons up and at him. We can't risk Swindle corrupting those 3 and forcing them to work for him. Really? You're sure you don't want us to go with B and the others? RC shook her head. No. We got into this mess because I sent you away. I was still anxious about your ability to take on Decepticons. Her gaze hardened and she shook her head. But now I see that was a mistake. You all are more than capable of fighting cons on your own here, so please, help us now. She also addressed Ochako and Itsuka as well. And if one of the cons follows you, give him hell. The 2 neighbors balled their fists eagerly. Will do, RC. Ochako affirmed. Good, now everyone, get in your positions. With that, Bumblebee, Ochako and Itsuka grouped up near the door while Izuku, Kyoka and Momo hid for the time being, the 3 ducking under the console as RC and Flare-Up stood ready. As she heard footsteps approach, RC motioned to make a fake grab for the mini-cons, just in time for Skullcruncher to knock down the door and roar at her, not so fast. Oh no. She pulled her arms away, holding her hands up in the air. Looks like we've been caught. Swindle managed to squeeze past his larger companion and glowered at the duo. Yes, you have. He gave Skullcruncher a sideways glance. And while I'm not a fan of causing even more damage to my ship, at least a door is fixable. But this, Swindle snapped a finger up to the gaping hole above. Do you know how much time and labor this is gonna cost me to get this thing at least somewhat spaceworthy? On this planet. Lil, Spittin', Polish'll fix, right up, good as new. Flare-Up shrugged with a knowing smirk. That in, about 30 tons of parts, give or take. Swindle narrowed his optics at the 2, without noticing Bumblebee, Ochako and Itsuka tiptoeing out of the room. That blast came from inside the ship. I don't know how or what caused it, but I do know that it has something to do with you being free. Swindle raised his arm, pointing his mounted cannon at the pair. So come clean, how did you get out? But, before the ladies could defend themselves, Skullcruncher's head perked up, a scent catching inside his nose. SNF, hold on a sec. Something smells off. Something like, he whirled around and caught sight of Bumblebee and the girls, clenching his teeth at them. That. Itsuka and Ochako screamed, only for Bumblebee to scoop them up in his arms and transform into beetle mode, his tires screeching as he drove off. What? Swindle exclaimed in disbelief. How did he get free? Flare-Up and RC shared a fist bump and a victorious smirk. Wouldn't you like to know? Oh, and, also, the orange and red femme blinked in and out of existence, appearing behind Skullcruncher and procuring her and RC's weapons off his back. I'll be repossessing these, thank you. The Croctobot gasped and went to swing at her, but she was gone in an instant. Hey. Scully, forget them. I'll handle these ladies. Swindle pointed after Bumblebee. You just get them before they escape. Right. Beast mode. With another powerful roar, Skullcruncher transformed into his crocodile mode and stomped out, charging after the beetle and his passengers through the rest of the ship. Swindle took a deep breath, pulling an energy blade off his hip while readying his cannon for a powerful blast. Over his shoulders, a set of energy turrets rose up, and from the center of his chest, a mini Gatling gun popped out, leaving him quite armed and dangerous. You ladies should have taken our deal when you had the chance. Taking her swords and gun back, RC armed herself as well, with Flare-Up spinning her own pistols in hand next to her. Yeah, still no. We're leaving here with that relic, whether you like it or not. RC and Flare-Up charged, the former lashing out with her Energon swords while Flare-Up blinked in and out, drawing fire from Swindle's turrets as the bot himself clashed his blade with RC's. HM, you like to think so, don't you? Well, too bad, because It was only then that Swindle noticed that, along with the mini-cons, the container holding the quill had been opened up as well, and taken. Whereas, how did it? The conbot cut himself off when he realized the bug. When Scully gets his hands on him, he's gonna, ow. Flare-Up, having outmaneuvered his turrets, got in a kick to the back and sent him stumbling. Yeah, no. Not this time. Taking aim, Flare-Up fired directly at his back, knocking both turrets off and causing them to fire at the walls, and as a result, destroyed a lot of his product. No. Swindle cried out, suddenly forgetting about the battle and rushing over to the walls, opening his chest and taking off as many of the untouched and undamaged weapons as he could. It's okay, I can still sell a lot of these. He said hurriedly as he shoved them into his chest compartment, putting them in his subspace storage. At least he was until RC kicked him straight in the head. Focus on the battle, not your junk. Back in the weapons room, while the ladies had Swindle distracted, Izuku, Momo and Kyoka took the opportunity to go forward with their part of the plan, to get the mini-cons up and out of harm's way. Alright, we ready. Getting a nod from both girls, Izuku ushered them to get on his back, where he then carried them both up to the console with one mighty leap. The trio landed directly in front of the mini-con panels, striding toward them with purpose. Okay, so how did Ibarra and the others say they awakened the other mini-cons? Momo asked. I think she said they just touched the panels and they woke up on their own. Kyoka mentioned as she drew closer to the one on the right with an outstretched hand. So maybe, gently, she placed her palm upon the metal plate and it began glowing, eliciting a gasp from her. Alright, this is it. Izuku and Momo looked to one another, sharing a nod before going to the center and leftmost ones respectively, putting their hands on them and watching as they all glowed in unison. And then, in a brief flash of light, the mini-cons emerged. Before Izuku stood a mostly black mini-con with blue arms and red feet, with door panels hanging off his arms. There was an Autobot symbol split in half between his two legs, which also had headlights on his knees. His head was blue and somewhat angular, with a red visor and silver faceplate giving him an emotionless countenance. And behind his head was, just the entire rear of a car, complete with spoiler and two large rear wheels settled over his shoulders. Kyoka, meanwhile, stared directly at a mostly blue bot with a bulbous chest and equally round shoulders, as well as very large three-fingered hands. He had some yellow detailing on his wrists and his face was mostly red, with a square-shaped helm and chiseled jaw contrasting against his somewhat curved physique along with his long, lanky legs. He also had an aircraft tailfin folded up on his back, which had an Autobot symbol on it, as well as a red visor, which glared deep into her soul. Finally, Momo was confronted with an absolute unit of a gray mini-con, one who was very blocky in build. From his legs to his arms to the massive blue pylons on either side of his head that were riveted with yellow bolts. Also, he had machine gun barrels installed on each shoulder, and on his legs were an Autobot symbol and fire hose. His helm was a bit more rounded, oddly enough, with a dark gray faceplate and, of course, red optics. Overall, these three were very threatening, which made it kind of hard to believe that they were all Autobots. They remained unmoving for a moment, which also was a bit off-putting to the teens. Are they even alive? Momo muttered. Now what do we do? Izuku whispered. I'm thinking. Kyoka scanned her eyes across the three bots. They all seemed to be online, but they weren't responsive. However, she also noticed that they seemed to have a very militaristic vibe to them, which gave the punk rocker an idea. She stood up straight and put on a serious expression, belting out, "All right, men. I want names and ranks." The black and blue mini-con was the first to perk up, and he immediately stood at attention with a salute. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Checkpoint present." The next was the gray one, who surprisingly had a very young-sounding voice. "Officer Anti-Blaze, reporting for duty, ma'am." And, "Sergeant Scythe, at your service." The blue mini-con with the large hands saluted as well, sounding to be the oldest of the bunch and coming with a Texan accent. "We are the Mini-Con Council, the emergency response team. What are your orders, ma'am?" "Ooh, I think I'm liking these guys already," Kyoka remarked. "I can't believe we keep getting lucky with all these high-ranking Mini-Cons," Momo said, putting a hand to her chin. Izuku simply shrugged at the stroke of luck. "Well, better not to look a gift horse in the mouth, I say." He gazed at the three Mini-Cons hopefully. "So, you think you guys could help us?" Anti-Blaze tilted his head. "What seems to be the situation?" Kyoka pointed directly over to Swindle, who was firing upon the two femmes with everything in his arsenal. "Men, our enemy is that Decepticon over there. He intends on destroying our friends and has already held us against our will." She paced back and forth in front of the trio, keeping herself up straight with her hands firmly behind her back. "What we need is something to bring him down hard and fast. So, my big question to you three is, do you have any weapons on you?" The emergency response team all eyed one another silently, only to break out into uproarious, jovial laughter. The humans were left confused before Scythe explained. "Biwahaha. Do we have weapons? Ma'am, we are weapons. Come on boys, let's show 'em what weaponizer mini-cons can do." Scythe then jumped up, his head folding into his chest before it folded upward, his arms shifting out on a pair of black, wing-shaped struts. Then, his legs folded up into the cavity his chest was once in, only for his arms to then rotate on the struts so that they slotted into his new undercarriage, his fingers straightening into 6 gun barrels. Landing on the control panel, Scythe was now a dual Gatling gun, leaving the humans slack-jawed. "Let's do it," Anti-Blaze agreed, his legs rotating back and folding up to become the front of his vehicle mode as a black panel on his chest folded up over his head. His arms rotated 180 degrees so that the machine gun barrels pointed downward, and then his entire pelvis separated from his torso, his entire lower half folding up onto his back. It was then revealed that there were 2 entire missile racks in his waist and upper body, which extended out as he landed on the console. "Ooh ho ho ho." Kyoka laughed ecstatically as she jumped up onto Scythe, manning the Gatling guns. "I really like these guys." Momo went over and stood behind Anti-Blaze, placing her hands on either side of him. I'd rather stay behind you, if that's alright." Time to bring out the big guns." Checkpoint sounded off, leaping into the air as his legs also folded back, and a small handle emerged from his right knee. He pulled his left arm to his side and he extended his right arm out as the entire right side of his body shifted up, bringing the rear of his car mode and his head with it. His head shifted into the vehicle mode bulk before it swiveled up and locked into place, becoming the barrel of a large, handheld gun which had a tire as its muzzle. And then Checkpoint clattered to the console's surface because there was no one to grab him. The humans stared blankly at the immobile mini-con for a moment before he piped up, I think I could use a bit of assistance." Oh, right, sorry." Activating One for All, Izuku used full cowling to heft Checkpoint up as best as he could, despite how awkward it was. He managed to sling the weapon up over his shoulder, using Checkpoint's arm-turned grip to balance him. "Okay, I think I got it." "Good, now be sure your aim is true, young organic." With Checkpoint's advice in mind, Izuku closed one eye and shifted himself, making sure the mini-con's barrel was aimed directly at Swindle. The moment RC ducked under Swindle's energy blade, that's when Izuku gave the word. "Now, fire." Checkpoint didn't waste a second taking the shot, and thankfully, the blast struck the con bot in the shoulder, toppling him over with a loud scream. "Ah, my arm. Where did that?" Swindle cut himself off when he saw 3 little organics on the control console, and they were all wielding weaponizer mini-cons. Scrap. Flare-Up and RC were left taken aback and yet extremely excited at what would come next. Do it, loves. Kyoka pumped a fist in the air, giving the order, now. Fire at will, men. And just like that, all hell had broken loose. Scythes gating gun barrels spun so fast that they were only barely visible, unloading round after round across the room and blowing up weaponry every which way. Anti-Blaze set forth not just blasting with his machine guns, but he pretty much let loose all of his missiles at once, making Swindle scream and duck for cover before one of them could hit him. And of course, Checkpoint kept up his own onslaught, with Izuku bracing him up the entire time. "Ah, no, no, no. My product," Swindle cried, seeing his precious collection of weapons go up in flames. "Stop it, stop it. This is for kidnapping our friends." Momo snapped as Anti-Blaze unleashed another round of missiles. "And for being a money-grubbing asshole," Kyoka added, watching as Scythe continued his warpath of destruction. All of a sudden, there was a loud boom that reverberated through the entire ship, and the two femmes had a feeling that wasn't from any of the mini-cons. "I think the cavalry's here," Flare-Up remarked with a knowing grin. RC nodded. "Yep, and that means it's time to take our leave." She and Flare-Up moved quickly over to the door, which slid open for them. "Guys, come on." The intel officer ushered for them to follow. "We've gotta get out of here." Giving a thumbs up, Kyoka gave the okay. "We're right behind you." "Alright, men, it's time to roll out." "Hee hee, we hear y'all loud and clear, ma'am." Scythe responded as his barrels stopped spinning and rotated upward, the barrels splitting off to transform into a pair of spinning VTOL rotors. From his back, the tailfin then folded down, revealing his vehicle mode to be a tiny Osprey helicopter. Kyoka yelped and held on as Scythe became airborne, flying straight out the door. "Come on boys, let's get the frag out of this place." "Right behind you, sir." Anti-Blaze agreed as his legs folded down from his back, his body becoming whole again before his arms rotated up. Momo was surprised to see that his vehicle mode was actually a stout little gray fire engine, with the hose pointed forward on top of his tiny cap. "Miss, I advise you get on and brace yourself." The creation user swallowed, but did as he asked despite her apprehension. "All right, of course." Securing her grip tightly to the top of his truck mode, Momo nodded and Anti-Blaze sped straight off the edge of the console, eliciting a scream from her lips. "Yeah." They landed on the ground safely and sped through the door, though Momo didn't stop screaming. That left Izuku and Checkpoint, the former glancing to the large weapon in his grasp. "So, how about you? Feel free to toss me down, young man. With your strength, I've got a feeling you can follow me easily." Checkpoint assured. "If you insist." Gah. With impressive strength, Izuku threw Checkpoint off the edge and down to the floor, the minicon's body returning to its normal shape aside from his legs, which stayed folded up. Checkpoint pressed his arms close to his sides, forming the doors of his small car mode as his head folded in again, and that was it. When Checkpoint landed, he was now a black and blue police car with a red siren light on top and red windows. Izuku leapt down after him and landed on his roof, crouching down against the car's spoiler as it zoomed through the doorway. RC and Flare-Up went to follow the others, but Swindle shot up before they could, his features contorted in utter rage as his merchandise burned around him. You ruined everything." "Ah." Before he could even blink, though, Flare-Up grabbed RC, zipped out of the room, and then forcibly closed the door behind them, locking it for good measure. "Gia. No. I think a yes would be more fitting here." RC gave a fist bump to her time-jumping friend. "Nice one there, Flare. Thank you very much." And, just to be on the safe side, now that they were in Swindle's personal collection room, Flare-Up rushed over and wrapped her arms around the fusion cannon, taking it right off the wall. "I think we should confiscate this for good measure. Far as I'm concerned, no one else should have something like this." RC wasn't one to argue that. "Hey, right, now let's roll." As that was going on, toward the front of the ship, Bumblebee had just arrived at the entry dock, and it didn't take long for him to locate the access hatch and the control switch for it. His tires screeched as he pulled to a stop, where Ochako and Itsuka immediately got out before he transformed back into robot mode. "ZRKT, okay ladies, ZRKT, we've got very little time. ZRKT, I'll distract, ZRKT, big, green and ugly, ZRKT, while you get that door open." ZRKT, sound good. The gravity quirk user sent Bumblebee a salute. You got it, B. We won't let you down. Itsuka gave a thumbs up, only to hear the approaching, thunderous footfalls of a certain Croctobot coming from the nearby hall. Oh boy, here he comes. Ochako, let's get this going. I've got a plan, so listen here. The two girls whispered among themselves while Bumblebee went back toward the hall, where the piercing glare of Skullcruncher could be seen slowly approaching from the darkness. The mighty Robo-Croc belted out a roar, and a bright green energy started collecting in his maw, before it shot out straight at B. Bumblebee countered by bringing out his new plasma cannon and shooting at the beam, creating an explosion that sent smoke and dust flying through the room. Grr, Skullcruncher, terrorize. Entering robot mode, Skullcruncher swiped his tail lance through the haze, skulking forward with a deep scowl. So you made off with one of our weapons, EH. I'll teach ya what it means to steal from US, bug. Grah. ZRKT, you wanna play rough? Okay. Bumblebee dodged just in time, charging up his cannon for an even bigger blast. ZRKT, say hello to my little friend. Pow! Skullcruncher howled painfully, the blast striking him directly in the knee and forcing him down into a crouch. The pain was so distracting that he missed Bumblebee closing in, and got kneed in the side of the head for his troubles. Back at the switch, Ochako and Itsuka were holding onto each other as they floated straight up, the former making use of her quirk while Itsuka prepared hers. Growing her right hand, the redhead set a determined gaze onto the control panel and reared her fist back. Alright, let's get out of this dump. Crash! Itsuka punched the switch, lowering the entry ramp and breaking the controls. Skullcruncher shook the daze out of his head just in time to hear alarms going off, his head snapping to the ramp just in time to see the girls drop down to the floor. Grr, oh no you don't. Bumblebee tried to intercept, but he was swatted to the side, Skullcruncher barreling to the girls with hands outstretched. But, right as he was about to close the distance, boom, wah, whoa. A massive tremor rocked the ship, tripping Skullcruncher up and allowing the girls to run away. What was that? Asked Ochako. I don't know. Itsuka shook her head as the ramp lowered all the way down, and a red and white blur came zooming in. But I think we're about to find out. Skullcruncher groaned and stood up, but then, whoosh, MHA, what? The Croctobot staggered back, seeing a certain city speaker fly right into the ship in her jet mode, with Jazz hitching a ride on her back. Yo, Skullcruncher. The lieutenant called out as he and Windblade careened straight at him. How about you sit down? Jazz leapt off of Windblade, rearing his fist back and punching Skullcruncher in the jaw. Windblade kept going and rammed directly into Skullcruncher's midsection, blowing him back even further into a bunch of metal crates that came crashing down on top of him, with a particularly heavy one landing on his head. Goo, Skullcruncher went to stand as Windblade transformed in front of him, but he was completely out of it. Why you won't get away? No, I think we will. Windblade activated her turbines and blasted Skullcruncher with wind energy, making him fly right back into the pile of crates and knocking him out cold. Dusting off her hands, Windblade retracted her wings into her back, standing proudly with her fists on her hips. And that takes care of that. Windblade, Jazz, Ochako and Itsuka rushed up to the two with Bumblebee right behind them. Ha, right on time. With a soft sigh, Windblade knelt down to greet the duo. Ha, I'm so glad to see you two safe. But, where are the others? Oh, don't worry, they're alright. Itsuka winked. Just taking care of Swindle. By the way, what shook the ship just now? Jazz chuckled and jerked his thumb toward the back of the ship. Hey, well, let's just say Erazer's making sure that Swindle and Skullcruncher won't be going anywhere anytime soon. Ain't no way Swindle's gonna take his scams anywhere after this. Just then, from the hall on the other side of the room, RC and Flare Up came rushing out, with Izuku, Kyoka and Momo all ahead of them riding on very tiny vehicles. Haha, guys, there you are. Kyoka greeted as she and Scythe flew over their heads and out the ramp. Come on, let's blow this pop stand. Windblade and Jazz were left astonished watching the three humans head out of the ship, with Bumblebee, Ochako and Itsuka all smiling victoriously. I'm sorry, but, mini-cons. Windblade exclaimed. Since when? And then she noticed exactly what Flare Up was carrying in her arms. And where the pit did you get a fragging fusion cannon? Explain later, leave now. Flare Up insisted. Yeah, we need to get out of here before. RC was cut off when, from the hall, the voice of Swindle yelled in pure, unbridled rage, "Get back here, you glitches." Okay, yeah, we should get going. Windblade concurred, leading the way out of the ship with everyone else following behind her. Sure hope these start working now. Touching her hand to her audio receptor, Windblade activated her comlink, in suspense for an answer. Hello base, come in base. Windblade. Red Alert replied almost instantly, much to everyone's relief. I've been trying to get a hold of all of you for hours. What in Primus name is going on over there? Smiling triumphantly, Windblade sighed and responded, it's a long story, Red, but everything's fine. Pow, ah. The city speaker just managed to avoid a blast from Swindle, the conbot standing atop the rampway and hobbling his way down with his cannon pointed right at the group. We need a ground bridge. Now. Now, Red. Her insistence proved fruitful as a swirling vortex opened up for the team not 2 seconds later, motivating everyone to jump and drive through as Swindle kept frantically firing and shouting at them to stop. Before she herself went through, though, Windblade took the opportunity to do something she learned on Earth. She raised her fist, and stuck her center servo up at Swindle. As the humans say, suck on that, dumbass. Swindle's optic twitched as Windblade ducked through the portal, and he was about to scream bloody murder at her, only for Erizar to come swooping down and land on his back, pinning him to the ground. The Falcon Maximal lowered her head, narrowing her optics at him. I've left you with a little parting gift, you opportunistic grifter. Hope you enjoy your stay on Earth. With that final insult, Erizar swooped up and flew into the portal, which closed right behind her. His metal teeth clenched in ire, Swindle was about to curse the lot of them, before an explosion from behind caught his attention. The once proud con artist spun around and was left utterly dismayed, seeing the engines of his ship go up in flames before the entire thing went lopsided, losing one of its stabilizers. Swindle fell to his knees, watching as Skullcruncher abandoned the burning ship. I'm ruined. Swindle fell face first into the ground, his anguished cries muffled by the mud in his mouth. Seeing this, Skullcruncher could only make a single conclusion. Well, guess this means we're not getting that Shanix. Across the world, meanwhile, Stain was completely in control of this farce of a fight. Right from the beginning, Shigaraki had been careless and foolhardy, overconfident in his ability to take him down. But the hero killer was quick to put him in his place, kneeling over his body. So, you want me to be a part of your crumbling little league, he said with disdain. But you won't accomplish anything if you don't have conviction and desire. Without those, you'll always be an aimless weakling, achieving nothing. After all, at present, Stain had one of his blades buried in Shigaraki's shoulder, and the other was stabbed into the floor beside his head. That's how you got here. Hey now, you're being a little rough, aren't you? Shigaraki breathed huskily, his eyes shifting to his attendant. Kurogiri, take him back. However, Kurogiri wasn't moving either, even though he was standing straight up against the bar. His shirt sleeve had also been cut into, stained with blood from the wound. I'm sorry, Shigaraki, but I cannot move. It must be the hero killer's quirk at work, he deduced. The word, hero, has lost all meaning in this society. Stain continued on, monologuing at the other's expense. The world is overrun by fakes and criminals like you who chase petty dreams. They must all be purged. He went to bring his sword closer to Tamura's neck, but the skinnier man managed to grab it with his bare hand, wrapping all 5 fingers around the blade. What do you think you're doing? If you touch this palm, I'll kill you. Slowly, Stain's blade became brittle and started to rust, cracks forming inside the tarnished blade. You sure talk a lot, hero killer. Conviction. Maybe I don't have anything as loaded as that. The sword broke and turned to dust when Shigaraki tightened his grip, taking Stain aback. If I had to choose a desire though, yeah, that'd be killing All Might. If this world wants to worship trash like him, I'll destroy their beloved symbol of peace, and then crush them while they're in shock. Stain leapt back as Tamura whipped his hand up at him, taking his other blade out of the villain's arm. Shigaraki grabbed the wound and winced. HMPH, you should learn not to play with knives. We don't have a healer in our party, ya know. Narrowing his eyes, Stain had to admit, he had a better feel for Shigaraki now after hearing that. I see your nature. It seems our goals fundamentally oppose each other. However, this wasn't in vain. A small grin lined his scarred features. We both agree that we need to destroy the present. But Shigaraki simply waved him off. I'm over this. Leave, drop dead. I'm the kind of person you hate the most, right? I was testing your motives. People always show their true colors when on the verge of death. It's abnormal, but there is desire, a warped sprout of conviction inside of you. Tilting his head, Stain grew intrigued. How will it bloom in the end? I wonder, maybe I'll let you grow. If you don't turn out well, I'll take care of you later. You think you can get rid of me? Right then, Kurogiri started to move again, flexing his hand as he regained feeling. HMPH, I'm free. Shigaraki faced his attendant, raising a hand to him. Kurogiri, someone as crazy as this would be nothing but a problem for the League of Villains. I want him gone. Please reconsider. Kurogiri attempted to appeal. This man would be a great asset if he joins us. I'd say this was a success. But Stain wasn't about to continue this sham of a meeting. My business is done here. Now, you will return me to Hosu. He licked his lips eagerly. There are still several false heroes I must attend to there. Kurogiri wasn't too thrilled about having to do this, but the tension between the hero killer and Shigaraki was as clear as day. Very well. He opened a portal behind Stain and the killer stepped through, leaving the small league to themselves. I certainly hope this isn't something we come to regret. The spectral man glanced over to Tamura, who went over to a nearby cabinet for medical supplies. Especially not you, Tamura Shigaraki. Setting his eyes upon the photos, Kurogiri picked up the one depicting the black-haired gentleman with the bushy mustache, wondering just who he could be. Still, there are other mysteries to be solved as well. Let us just hope that, whoever these people are, they will not get in our way. And it's the end of Season 2 Part 24 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.